Okay, the hour is 9. It's 3 a.m. on a blustery and welcoming cool day in our October. I want to welcome senators and guests to the LSU Faculty Senate meeting. Time to bring this meeting to order. As usual, the time is short and the agenda is long. Our transition back to in-person has been an adventure, and here we are again. And moving along, I'd say at a reasonable, if not rapid pace. First, a few introductions for those of you who have not met me before. My name is Andy Lopez. I'm the president of the LSU Faculty Senate and a full professor of veterinary surgery in the School of Veterinary Medicine. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves, starting with Vice President Joan King.
I'm Vice President of the Faculty Senate. My name is Joan King. I'm a professor in the School of Nutrition and Food Sciences. I'm a food chemist.
I'm Roger Lane from the Department of Biological Sciences and I'm a member of the Benefits Committee.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marwan Khan. I'm in the Department of Engineering Department and Construction Management, and I'm the Secretary of the Faculty Senate Executive.
I'm Inessa Bazayev. I'm a professor of music theory and head of the theory area at the College of Music and Dramatic Arts, and I'm a member at large.
I'm Jeff Rowland. I'm an associate professor of philosophy, member at large at SEC, and also a member of the APIC committee.
And McKernan, past president of the Faculty Senate, adjunct professor in animal science right now.
And now I'd like to introduce the most important person in the room, and that is Ms. Susanna Knoll, who keeps all things running, all meetings on time, and generally keeps track of me about 24/7. Without her, none of this would be possible, and we hats off to her for bringing this entire hybrid meeting and everything associated with it together. So thank you very much, Ms. Knoll. May we just have a little round of applause? I think. Thank you. All right, as you can see, we've switched our location. We've done this for social distancing, and a Zoom venue is provided for those with LSU COVID accommodation. As of today, we've arranged for the meeting to be live streamed so that no LSU faculty member encounters obstacles to attending the meeting. As per our constitutions and bylaws that were approved by consensus, we will adhere to Robert's rules for our meeting, both those here and on Zoom. VP King will serve as our parliamentarian. Every member of this Senate is expected to use the voice of those they represent. Please raise your hand to be recognized, and when recognized, state your name prior to your remarks. This helps us keeping track of everyone and with the greatest accuracy, and attributing comments to the correct individual. Okay. Respect the right of someone who is recognized or has the floor to speak. As tempting as it may be, my friends, because we're all now thoroughly Zoomified, do not please refrain from using the chat function. This is a form of speaking without being recognized. If you have a technical issue, you can message Ms. Knoll directly. Healthy debate on all topics is strongly encouraged. That is why we are here. However, as faculty elected to represent our LSU, we are always expected to be respectful of our colleagues, whether or not we agree with them. Candid, but not caustic. As senators, you are entrusted with a great deal of responsibility, and I'm sure you're going to act accordingly. All right. Let's get this party started. All right, first up, the announcement of alternates. Claudio Del Piero for Samathambi Jayasila. Juan Colomina Alamana for Mark Wagner. Have I missed anyone? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Okay, so for roll, as you know, we have a new mechanism. Please email your, the indicated item, your full name, whether you're a guest or a senator. And if you are an alternate, if we were, just in case we were notified ahead of time. So this will be our mechanism by which we introduce the guests as well. Now, I will introduce the guests that are here, however, as part of our agenda. The guests are physically here. So, please stand when I call your name. So first up will be, and forgive me, I'll do my very best. Ms. Rebecca Marchiafava from STAR, who will be talking to us about WellSTAR. And, as you know, we've had no shortage of, Title IX issues, shall we call them. And LSU works closely with STAR, and in fact, she'll explain the relationship better, that this is an opportunity for everyone to become familiar with one of the major resources available to LSU. All right, and Jason will also be here, I'm sorry, and he will be presenting the, Jason Hicks, sorry, VP Jason Hicks, my goodness, I'm so sorry. And he will be giving us an update on the LSU COVID, the status of LSU COVID mitigation measures. All right, with that, we do have some public comments, and Ms. Knoll will give their name and the agenda item on which they are making a public comment, and we ask that you come to the podium. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please be respectful of the time. Other than that, I cede the floor.
All right, thank you. Professor Edward Shahada is the first registered public comment. He will be commenting on the resolution 21-08 that will have the first reading this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Knowles. Faculty senators, thank you. I'm alarmed by the Senate leadership's recent conduct. First, as you know, the Board of Supervisors recently tried to kill the Faculty Council. The Council is the only mechanism by which the entire faculty can meet and deliberate. 3 officers knew of the Board's action in advance. The rest of us apparently would be kept in the dark. How was the Board's mischief finally discovered? Well, by chance, actually. Just before the Board's meeting, Dr. Lopez met with her executive committee, and the news was buried in the back of a document and reportedly never mentioned at the meeting. This explosive item was not even on her agenda. As people were leaving the meeting, one member noticed this, became alarmed, and asked Dr. Lopez what's going on, and apparently it was shrugged off. But that shrug was in sharp contrast to the earlier emails that Drs. Lopez and McMillan and Dr. John King were furiously exchanging with each other. Emails that explicitly excluded the rest of her own executive committee, never opposing this drastic action, no intention of informing the faculty, the Senate, or even her own executive committee. Indeed, Dr. Lopez demanded, get this, demanded that for the sake of upper administration, this news must be kept confidential. Confidential. 36 hours before the Board was about to restructure faculty governance, and Dr. Lopez wanted to keep it a secret to protect the folks upstairs. You represent this body, not the upper administration. Where were you when the faculty needed you? Indeed, Dr. McMillan speculated correctly that the Board's action was retribution, quote unquote, against the faculty. If LSU faculty are facing retaliation, then as faculty leaders, you 3 are obligated to sound the alarm. Where were you when the faculty needed you? This past summer, almost 350 faculty signed a petition pleading for a vaccine mandate. It was presented to Dr. Lopez, who more or less blew it off. Indeed, Dr. McMillan dismissed the exercise, saying that the petition barely accounts for 20% of the faculty. Really, with all due respect, sir, tell me how many hundreds of faculty, how many terrified constituents does it take to get your attention? Actually, Dr. McMillan opposed the vaccine mandate for students. He called it potentially unlawful reflects badly on the faculty, and that's okay, because he is entitled to his opinion, and I will defend that. But 90% of the senators here supported the mandate. You, sir, work for the Senate does not work for you. Where were you when the Senate faculty needed you? Dr. Lopez, there are polls at faculty about teaching during the pandemic, and she did so 3 days before classes began, as if it really mattered at that point. Where were you a few months earlier, ma'am, with all due respect, when the faculty actually needed you? In Georgia, the attack on tenure, what happened there is coming to Louisiana. We need to be strong, we need to be united. Do you think they'll defend us? Do you think they'll defend you? I doubt they'll even tell you if the attack is coming. Respected colleagues, it seems that the Senate leadership doesn't need us. I wonder if we need them. It's time, I believe, respectfully, to step down. I understand your years of service, but it is time to step down. The stakes are now just too high. It is time for change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Suzanne Marchand, Professor Marchand, is the next registered comment on resolution 21-08. You may come to the podium if you wish.
Sorry, sat in the wrong place.
That's all right.
Took the comfy chairs.
I understand.
Good afternoon, and thanks very much for the opportunity to give a public statement on support of Resolution 2108. I'd like to begin by saying that I bear no ill will at all towards any of the members of the executive committee. I've worked amicably with many of them on other university-wide committees, and I know them to be hardworking, dedicated faculty who devoted countless hours to serving LSU as they see fit. But it's clear to me from the events of the last 18 months, which I've observed as an interested and concerned outsider, that there's an urgent need for new forms of more efficient, transparent, and interventionist faculty governance in this university. And I think it best that a new team be elected to undertake those transformations. Colleagues, it's clear to me as a student of the history of the university that we're at a turning point, and the next few years will be critical in determining many of the issues of great consequence for the future. The future of tenure, the relationship between in-person and online instruction, the boundaries of academic freedom and freedom of speech on campus, and the degree to which we sacrifice research and teaching to bureaucratic reportage and data collection. Faculty need a seat at the table to determine budget priorities and stand up for academic freedoms rather than contenting ourselves with accepting new initiatives as fait accompli. We have noticed that the enrollments of LSU, for example, have increased by 9%, and yet almost everyone I speak to says faculty lines have disappeared and are decreasing. Someone needs to ask, where did all the money go? Faculty need a seat at this table. That does not mean that we position ourselves as enemies of the administration. After all, administrators are our colleagues as well, and our mutual interest lies especially in providing an excellent education to the young persons of this state. But we need to be brave enough and take the time to ask tough questions and to keep up pressure where we see an urgent need of reform. We saw this work in the case of the faculty subcommittee on vaccine mandates. We now need to translate that energy and courage to other matters as well. The Faculty Senate is the key to energizing a more grassroots faculty, as called for too in another of today's resolutions. In my view, a full revision of practices and bylaws is in order, one that, for example, follows through on the promise made several weeks ago to convene an ad hoc committee to discuss the role of the Faculty Council. It's also urgent that the Faculty Senate meeting become more deliberative, perhaps by making all those who wish to make announcements put them in writing ahead of time for pre-circulation, and by foregrounding new business rather than leaving burning issues to the last. Senators need to be able to discuss big issues, such as the allocation of COVID funding, or the extent to which HRM is expanding its power, or the extent to which committee work is being done properly. I was disheartened to find that there is no longer a committee on committees, and that committees do not report regularly to the Senate, as I believe they must. Otherwise, they risk becoming irrelevant and or also becoming rogue committees whose work we do not supervise. There are undoubtedly many other big issues that you can think of that need our collective wisdom and deliberation. I will end simply by reiterating that we do not need to make this resolution or its discussion a personal matter, nor do we need to make a laundry list of things done and undone, but the times they are changing, Bob Dylan said many years ago, and that is more true than ever before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Carol Friedman, she will be making a public comment on Resolution 2106.
Esteemed colleagues, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this resolution. I was very excited to see this come through. Resolution entitled, "A Call to Bring LSU's Vaccination Mandate into Conformity with State Laws and National Guidelines." However, when I reviewed it, in my opinion, it does not bring LSU's policy in conformance with the state law. And so I'm offering the state law. Hopefully all of you received this packet. I'm sorry, I had to send out 24 pages, but it's kind of a complicated topic. I've highlighted my key points here. First, that the section says that anyone who is entering schools does not need to comply with the immunization requirements of schools in Louisiana. So the resolution states that students may be exempted, but in fact, the law says no person seeking entry, that is no student, shall be required to comply. Second, evidence of immunity is sufficient. I wonder why LSU only allows 90 days for immunity. I thought this would be brought into alignment, but it was not. Part of the complaints by those bringing the resolution said the students have to check a series of boxes online. One of the attachments that I provided is actually the Department of Education form that everyone else in the state can fill out that requires only a signature. Now, when you go into your multi-factor authentication app to request your exemption, I would argue this is much more secure than a signature. Further, students have to say, I understand if I claim exemption, I must comply with COVID-19 testing requirements and other prevention guidance. What is this prevention guidance? What are they saying they will comply with? I think this is not only discrimination, but I think it's harassment for these students. Many of these students claiming exemption have medical reasons that they cannot be vaccinated, and yet this is what they're subjected to when they exercise their right under Louisiana law. Next, the resolution seeks to know if students are partially vaccinated, unvaccinated, and a number of other specific health information that is not authorized by revised statute 17, section 170. And I believe it's not asked of anyone else, and I think that that is wrong. The resolution talks about the policy of random testing. Let me just see if I can scroll down here. So that is referring to, section F, in the event of a disease preventable outbreak, vaccine preventable outbreak. There's a lot of information that COVID is not a vaccine preventable disease. I attached a recent paper that was actually published 2 days ago in Cellular and Molecular Immunology that states that the variant A30 is heavily mutated and evades vaccine-induced antibodies, which means the vaccine does not prevent COVID infection. Now, it does state vaccines protect against severe disease and death. And I think, being this is not cited, that's called common knowledge, and everyone knows the vaccines were developed to prevent severe disease. In which case, COVID-19 is not a vaccine preventable disease. Now, if it were, which it's not, the only remedy, point 5 here, is to exclude students from attendance. They cannot be tested. when vaccinated students are not tested. They cannot be told to wear masks when vaccinated students are told not to wear masks. That is called discrimination. And I just want to point out that what we do at LSU, as one of the speakers alluded to earlier, it matters, and it matters to those in this state. We are seen as leaders of this state. This is a letter I had received actually from the Diocese of Baton Rouge in July about my kids going back to school. And they say, anyone who provides the school with verification that they have been vaccinated does not have to wear a face mask, and they do not have to social distance. So all of these schools, all of these daycares, everyone that is covered by this same law that we are covered by here at LSU, they think it's okay to discriminate against unvaccinated students because of what we are doing here. So while I commend my colleagues for wanting to bring LSU's COVID-19 policy in line with state law, I believe this resolution is seriously flawed, and I believe that we as faculty, you as the faculty senate, need to look at the law and guarantee these students' rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Blake Howe is the next person that's been registered for comments. It's on resolution 21-08. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Blake Howe. I teach in the College of Music and Dramatic Arts. And I want to express my disappointment in the Faculty Senate leadership for their failure to respond to a recent event. On Thursday, September 9th, 2021, the LSU Board of Supervisors released the agenda for its meeting the following day. It contained a proposal to substantially revise the bylaws concerning faculty governance. This was alarming. Any good faith changes to the role, responsibility, and organization of faculty governance should be made in consultation with faculty. But these revisions were being made without the Senate's input. That evening, I sent an email to the members of the Faculty Senate Executive Committee. I told them about the proposed revisions, and I said that the Senate should respond to them. Several members at large replied, and they seemed to share my concern. But faculty senators were never alerted. I'm having a hard time understanding how such a profound breakdown in communication could have happened, but it did. The president, past president, and vice president knew about these changes. They had the means to alert you, to alert the entire faculty even, but they never did. Word about the revisions spread on social media and through informal channels of communication. Concerned faculty members worked behind the scenes, contacting board members and administrators, and it was thanks to these efforts, and no thanks to the Senate leadership, that the resolution was shelved. I want to put this as plainly as I can. Senate leadership knew that the board was planning to revise the bylaws concerning faculty governance, and they did not tell me. Here is why I am still so upset about this. Several weeks ago, the Georgia Board of Regents effectively removed the protections of tenure at the universities under its purview. Several efforts to gut tenure and weaken faculty governance are underway at other universities. If, before its next meeting, the LSU Board of Supervisors were to post an agenda that contained revisions to the rules concerning tenure, faculty governance, or our academic freedom, are you confident that the current Senate leadership would alert you? I'm not. I'd like to see a more assertive, more formidable, more vigilant, and more transparent faculty senate, especially now, given the stakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's one last registered public comment. Valerie Gibson is on resolution 21-06. Can you come to the podium? Thank you.
The combined total of students and employees of LSU as reported on LSU's website is 39,000. Here are active case numbers for the last month. September 13th, 91.2% of the population. September 21st, 58.1% of the population. September 28th, 38. This is 0.1% of the population with generous rounding. October 27th, just yesterday, there was a whopping 10 students and 1 employee, for a total of 11. This does not even justify giving you a percentage, but that makes 0.028% of the population with active cases. But forgetful or uninformed, an active case does not mean they are seriously ill. It doesn't even mean that the person has any symptoms. For the CDC's own website, you can test positive for COVID even if you have a common cold. You can continue to test positive long after you are no longer contagious. You can also test positive if you're vaccinated, but nobody wants to acknowledge that. And instead of actually following science, LSU's faculty senate is proposing to tighten the restrictions even more. Following the science would indicate a loosening of restrictions. Yet we have a group of people who are comfortable in their ivory tower where they don't answer emails or phone calls and are accountable to no one, and they enjoy exerting control over their subjects, my daughter included. Since when do we allow political editorialists to dictate health and safety measures? Why should thousands of young adults be subjected to scientifically baseless medical procedures against their will? The sponsors of this resolution are from the music, mass communication, philosophy and religious studies, political science, and history departments. It is a glaringly obvious point that no senator from a medical or legal department sponsored this. If we're talking about bringing LSU's policies more into line with Louisiana law, let me remind everyone what Louisiana law says about vaccine exemptions, even though Ms. Carroll already did that, and what a school can do as alternative measures when students enact their rights to opt out. No person seeking to enter any school shall be required to comply with provisions of this section if the student submits either a written statement from a physician stating that the procedure is contraindicated for medical reasons, or a written consent from the student is presented. In the event of an outbreak of a vaccine-preventable disease, the administrators are empowered, upon the recommendation of the Office of Public Health, not their own decision, to exclude from attendance unimmunized students until the incubation period has expired. First of all, as we have seen in the past several months, COVID-19 is still not a vaccine-preventable disease. These vaccines act against COVID the way Tamiflu acts against the flu. They don't cure it, they don't prevent infection. They may lessen the symptoms, but even that is a maybe, as many people have died from COVID while being fully vaccinated. That is scientific fact. Secondly, the only recourse offered to schools through the law is that unvaccinated students can be excluded from attendance if and only if the Office of Public Health recommends such actions, and then only until the incubation period expires. There is no provision in the law for the punitive measures LSU is taking against unvaccinated students, which, by the way, a lot of them are doing for religious reasons, which makes that a protected class. Furthermore, there are 3 other required vaccinations on LSU's list: MMR tetanus and meningococcal conjugate. The only requirement for opting out of these is the state exemption. That's it. Never has LSU tried to push any other type of medical procedure on students enacting that right. With the negligible amounts of positive cases, why would any rational, educated person be making this argument other than for political reasons? You want to do some more testing? How about test for natural immunity and leave our students alone? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to all of those who made public comment. Public comment is certainly important, and we appreciate your presence here today. All right, moving on. The minutes were all distributed to you. They were rather long, as was our meeting, and I hope you've all had a chance to at least breeze through them. Are there any comments, suggestions, or immediate corrections necessary for the minutes? Yes, Professor Feldman.
Yes, Meredith Feldman, HSS. First of all, just, I guess it's minor, but it matters, can test. Everyone from HSS is listed as from HSD. Oh, no insult to HSE, but.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, and then, under, the President's Report, Part 2. It says Part 2, History, Cons of our Constitution and Bylaws, and then Part 3, Factor Senate, Constitution and Bylaws. As I recall, that discussion there was going to be a PowerPoint slide presentation, and that was tabled. It's not clear from here that this information, in fact, was not discussed, and that PowerPoint presentation was not made.
Okay, Well, I'll have to look more closely. Those may have just been headers that unfortunately were carried on my personal notes that were otherwise carried over. It's in my president's report, you said?
Well, there are two paragraphs describing a discussion about the faculty council, and then there is talking about Professor King's and Professor McMillan's PowerPoint slides.
Okay, that needs to be corrected, yes, it was not done, you're absolutely right. Okay, I thank you for the clarification. Yes, we will make sure that is, yeah, we'll take that as a friendly amendment and remove that, absolutely. Thank you.
Any
Okay,
objections to a friendly amendment to the minutes? Hearing none, no.
okay, yes.
Oh,
Professor Vada.
I just sent an email to the Senate email, just my department is giving us BCS and
Oh dear.
PBS.
Oh, yeah, I understand. To be fair, we're from the same college, so
Yeah.
he's from a different department, so I'm just teasing him just a little bit. My department is BCS. Very sorry about that.
Would love to be in
We'll
your
get
department.
that correct. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Any others? Well, thank you very much for all of those comments. Okay, so we have accepted those amendments with no further changes other than small changes or typographical errors that we are happy to correct should we be alerted to them later. Is there a motion to accept the minutes? Okay, have we got it? All right, and we'll just go with if there's anyone opposed. If not, we'll accept them by consensus. All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved. All right, next up, my president's report. Let me begin by thanking you, each and every one of you. Oh, sorry, I have to time myself. All right, stay on track, stay on time, yes? All right, let me begin by thanking each and every one of you for stepping up to the plate for your LSU faculty. You are here to represent our LSU and to make a difference. Your presence during these challenging times says everything, and you have my gratitude. All right, starting at the top, Board of Supervisors. Quick update. As you know, I, with input from our colleagues throughout the system, wrote and presented all of the faculty reports to the Board of Supervisors for the better part of the last 2 years. Reports that were not exactly welcomed, as I took some very public ground meetings. However, and this was because due to COVID restrictions, there was limited attendance at the Board of Supervisors meeting, virtual or in person. Therefore, the Council of Faculty Advisors, which is composed of members from all of our campuses, were barred from attending. All right, so, however, there's changes on the horizon. I arranged a meeting with the board liaison, Jason Grotti, shortly after our last meeting, and after the last meeting of the Board of Supervisors. After some rather candid exchange, we agreed on some positive changes. Tremendous news. The faculty, the Council of Advisors, again, members of all of our campuses, will be welcome at the upcoming Board of Supervisors meeting. And perhaps for the first time ever, we, as a collective, will meet with the chairperson of the Board of Supervisors, currently Remy Starnes, prior to the general Board of Supervisors meeting. This is a first. I expect, though I can't say for sure, of course, our discussion will include potential changes in Board of Supervisors governing documents that impact faculty. It's worth a shot. All right, next, administrative news. The LSU mask mandate remains in effect and at present will likely remain so for the foreseeable future. And you, my friends, are in luck. Masks emblazoned with the LSU Faculty Senate are available for all senators. I invite you to wear them both as a badge of courage and in recognition of your selfless service. If nothing else, you have your mask just in time for Halloween. All right. And I have to tell you, I really pushed poor Miss Knoll saying, oh, we have to have them for Halloween. And she made it happen. She's a magician. All right, back to work. The LSU, okay, I've already raised the issue of the long overdue retirement of LSU 360. No need to rehash that issue, but fair warning, your efforts to fill those drop-down boxes from Hades that supposedly represent all that quantifies your value to LSU may have been in vain, friends. Faculty have been advised to save the information that was entered in the form of a Word document. Remember, like old times? Perhaps so that the information can again be meticulously entered one drop box at a time. Well, I'm led to believe that this is unlikely given the success of LSU 360. Well, you figure out the odds yourself. All right, the agenda of the last meeting of the FSCC with the Provost was a bit long. Yep, 23 items. To say he was displeased was a bit of an understatement. Highlights of concern was the apparent disappearance of the committees associated with building names, as well as the campus-wide administrative diversity, equity, and inclusion committees. No word on building names yet, but it appears that the DEI subcommittees are reigniting. The status of the salary and equity efforts. The process is underway to contract an outside vendor to do a comprehensive review. In my years at LSU, I've been aware of innumerable outside vendor reports that seem to disappear into the ether from which they emerge. In my various roles in the Senate, salary and equity has been part of my never-ending mantra, for at least 7 years. The progress of these efforts will be followed to the ends of the earth. The persistence of salary and workload inequities in our LSU is inexcusable and embarrassing. Critical topic, teams classroom. It appears that to avoid conflict, confusion, and/or inadequate support by the FTC, faculty were denied access to the team's classroom function, I guess. The justification was that we have an LMS system called Moodle, and the current leadership does not have the resources to support another, theoretically. However, after a bit of a standoff, access to Teams Classroom will now be granted to those who request to use it as an adjunct teaching resource. However, technical support is unlikely to be very robust. All right, you may remember taking a job satisfaction survey sometime back called Collaborative on Academic Careers in Higher Education or COACH. The results are in, and faculty were pretty candid. At this point, plans are underway to create measures to address the issues in the survey in a meaningful and quantifiable manner. My experience is that surveys are meaningless if there is no action, other than as a device to mentally decompress via no holds barred. So more on that to come. Next, the FSCC met with Dean Spencer to discuss the status of the graduate school. During the meeting, it became evident that the newly minted graduate school strategic plan had not been distributed as intended. That is, it was not shared outside of graduate advisors. As such, the FSCC, with the consent of Dean Spencer, distributed it to all senators. We are relying on you to gather feedback from your faculty and to share it as instructed in the email. This will be vital to our role in educational policy. Dean Spencer is scheduled to be at our November meeting to respond to the feedback and provide an update on the forward trajectory of our LSU graduate school. Okay, and from the FSCC meeting with CFO Donna Torres. LSU first, an update. My friend, dependent maternity care will not be covered due to the overall increased cost to the plan. We asked for this, it was considered, and it has been turned down because it was, according to CFO Torres, it increased the cost of the plans too much. So, buyer beware, your dependents do not have maternity care. All right, many participate in the health and dependent care programs. There was an extension to those pre-tax funds last year, meaning when you have these funds removed or put into set aside prior to without being taxed, and then you can apply them for dependent care or health care reimbursement. There was an extension, so you got, I think, an additional year, but it's not going to happen again. So you only have until the usual deadline, which I believe is the end of February, to use those funds. So those of you who use the programs may want to plan accordingly and consider reducing your contributions next year, as there's always the chance of losing your investment, so to speak. All right, concerns were raised over advertisements for Caesars Casino during football games. While the status of sports betting has certainly changed recently, advertising gambling at college games does not seem in the best taste, nor does putting the eye of the tiger on vodka bottles. All right, issues of dated, decrepit, dangerous, or otherwise delinquent classroom technology was raised once again. It appears that CIO Woolley, CFO Torres, and the new interim VP of Online Education, Kathy Murphy, are working with the Uber Tech Committee, again initiated and named by the FSCC, by the way, to gain a tangible plan for upgrade, maintenance, and support of classroom technology. You already know my shtick about taxation without representation. That is the tax on graduate student type stipends, a whopping 38%. According to the administration, a working group has been formed to investigate ways of keeping our graduate program solvent without taxing their hardworking mentors. More on that to come for sure. The traffic snarls in front of the stadium on Nicholson due to asynchronous lights on North and South Stadium was noted. It's been raised as an issue by numerous faculty. It appears that the situation has improved, at least momentarily. However, please let me know if you find yourself trapped in front of our stately stadium between two lights that refuse to work together. All right, local news. COVID has been the focus for me as president and for the FSCC for the majority of the last 2 years. To be honest, COVID meetings, questions, dilemmas, and communication still account for a great deal of each of my days. It's a full-time job to field all the COVID issues along with the many other topics vital to our LSU faculty. So I suggested, and the FSC agreed, that we form an ad hoc COVID committee to address all things COVID. All right. The committee will serve as a liaison between the faculty and the administration. They will be responsible for compiling COVID challenges to safety, instruction, scholarly work, and yes, service. And in conjunction with the FSCC and council with administrative and ad hoc members on the committee, they will make recommendations to the administration. The mission statement generated by the FSCC is shown on the slide. And the administrators that have just recently agreed to serve are the Dean of Science and Scientific Advisor to the President, Cynthia Peterson, the Director of the Student Health Center, Julie Hooperish, and the Associate VP of the Office for Research and Economic Development, Kina Arbuthnot. The FSCC is soliciting nomination for appointment to the committee, self, non-self, friend, frenemy, and everything in between. Members will be appointed by consensus of the FSCC and meetings initiated immediately. Member at large on the FSCC, Jeff Rowland, will be the FSCC liaison. Next, as I mentioned previously, we, the LSU Faculty Senate, have not been in compliance with our Constitution in terms of having a meeting with the entire LSU faculty once a year. This has not occurred according to the Constitution since 1996. So that I admit we were all a bit confused, unprepared, and uninformed about the process. But, my friends, FSCC members braved the dark recesses and cobwebs of our institutional archives to emerge with following treats. To summarize. All right, the meeting is presided over by the President of the Faculty Council, currently President and Chancellor William F. Tate IV. It occurs after the last Faculty Senate meeting of the year and before the official end of the spring semester. A quorum of LSU faculty is required. The Faculty Senate President presents a report to the faculty. The LSU faculty have the option to overturn any decision or action taken by the Faculty Senate over the preceding year. We are about 1,700 faculty strong. It is imperative that all faculty can participate. However, this is not an undertaking for any single person. The faculty meeting last April took a number of meetings, consumed hundreds of man-hours, and was a unified effort of faculty and administrative leadership. So I recommended, and the FSCC agreed to form an ad hoc committee to facilitate the annual meeting in coordination with the administration. Again, nominations are needed. Members will be appointed by FSCC consensus, and activity will begin immediately in anticipation of the meeting this April. President Tate he's been on board from the beginning, and it's certainly looking forward to presiding over the meeting. Vice President Joan King and Secretary Marwa Hassan will be the FSCC liaisons. All right, I want to thank all of you who attended the inaugural Faculty Senate Boot Camp yesterday. Despite storms, delays, and an unfortunate series of events, A cadre of newly elected faculty senators met, asked questions, and to my benefit, made some very thoughtful and helpful suggestions for communicating actions on faculty senate initiatives in the form of resolutions. The FSCC will be working to implement the recommendations post haste. They were very, very helpful. It is my hope that newly elected faculty senators form a class of sorts with new ideas, initiatives, and plans to make our LSU a better place. We're counting on you, friends. So here we are. All right. The president is a volunteer. There are no tangible perks, benefits, or attributes other than a true commitment to our LSU. And a bit of sleep deprivation, probably a lot of that actually. I serve only at the pleasure of our LSU faculty. When we were children, I was complaining to my dearest friend, who still remains my dearest friend, about my frustrations with those close to me and how I very much wanted to please them, but I could not sort out what they wanted. She said maybe they don't really want anything, and told me to listen between the words to hear the meaning. Listen between the words to hear the meaning. Okay, as always, I conclude with my thanks. Service, fortitude, resilience, profound instruction, scholarly achievement. Our LSU faculty have it all. You are the voice of that faculty. Never cease to be fierce for the faculty. I believe in them. All right, that's it. Any questions on my report? All right then. All right, first up, VP Hicks to provide us an update on LSU COVID mitigation measures.
All right, thank you for inviting me to speak. I am here on behalf of the Provost, of course. He is at a Board of Supervisors meeting today, and Dr. Arbuthnot is also away, so I'm with you guys. So I will do my very best. For those that don't know me or aren't familiar, my name is Jason Hicks. I'm actually a Provost Fellow in Academic Affairs, sort of taking on the role that Jane Cassidy left when she was Vice Provost to then be the interim VP for Civil Rights and Title IX. My home department is psychology, and I served more recently as an Associate Dean for Humanities and Social Sciences, just for a bit of background on me. What I'm going to do today is try to address a few items that were provided to the Provost to cover. And I have a slide deck here that I'm going to go through that is relatively full and dense with information. The goal is not for any of us to read it carefully at this point in time. It's going to be made available to you afterwards as a piece of information to keep for further consideration. But what I want to do is sort of go over some of the main issues and aspects of our COVID mitigation strategy for the university. And as we go forward through that, we'll, of course, have some chance to go through any questions as well. So one thing to keep in mind is that most of this information that I'm presenting is available on the COVID Roadmap website. So I know that you're probably familiar with that, but I also am going to go through just some brief slides that illustrate where to find that information, where to access it. One thing to keep in mind is that we have a host of conditions or factors that are in mind for LSU in evaluating procedures for mitigating COVID. They're all listed here. Again, the idea isn't to go through each of these one over the other. But one thing to keep in mind is that things like transmission rate will depend on how that relates to the community presence of COVID or of the SARS virus, number of positive cases on campus, a number of factors that are in consideration for how we deal with this. The decisions that are made by the administration and by leadership are informed by available data. So there are not only strategies that are available, but also data on hand, some of which was alluded to earlier today, that are used in making decisions about how to move forward. Protocols are modified based on the conditions on the ground. So on campus, as conditions change, we can modify those protocols as needed. So one of the questions we received to address today is the vaccination percentages for faculty, staff, and students. Again, these numbers are all on the COVID dashboard, but just for some broad brushes here, we do have for students a vaccination rate of 83.9, so about 84%, and for employees at about 77%. So the majority of the students are vaccinated. The student vaccination rate is broken down a bit further here. In the dark purple, about 81.6% are fully vaccinated, so have both shots of one of those vaccines. There's a slender 2.3% of those that are partially vaccinated, that's the gray slice, and then about 16% are unvaccinated. And as I'll allude to later on, the unvaccinated students or those partially vaccinated are then subject to the testing regime that the university has available, and we'll get into that in a minute. So the majority of the students are fully vaccinated, a small percentage that are partially vaccinated, and a remainder that are unvaccinated. Those that are partially vaccinated still have to sign a waiver and participate in monthly required testing, just as a confirmation of that. The faculty vaccination rate, if you look at faculty alone in the context of employees, is almost mirroring the student vaccination rate. So that 84% are fully vaccinated, and then 16% are unvaccinated among the faculty. And that's full-time faculty. It's important to note that there is variation among different categories of employees at LSU, and so the percentages differ a bit. Of course, you can understand that 77% here is a weighted average of all of the other classifications on campus. One of the other critical pieces of the mitigation effort is wastewater testing. So one of the things that I think is probably one of the real linchpins of our ability to meet and mitigate any of the risk about COVID on campus is the wastewater testing program. So what we do here is we have testing of sewage that leaves various places on campus, such as LSU residence halls, on-campus apartments, and Greek housing, to identify potential outbreaks. This is done on a weekly basis, and the dashboard related to these data is updated every Thursday. In fact, it was updated again today. And as you can see in this case, this is just a summary. I'm not going to go through all this in detail, but the testing that is triggered by wastewater testing itself has been triggered only 5 times during the semester, and these were all early on in the semester. So that happened twice after the week of move-in in early August, twice in the first week of classes, and then once in the last week of September. 5 weeks has passed without a trigger at all. And the idea here is that once the wastewater triggers a certain amount, then everyone in that community is tested whether they're vaccinated or not. So they're subject to testing whenever those boxes on the dashboard sort of go into red. This is very difficult to see, I understand, but what you'll notice here on the left is the listing of all the housing and residence halls in areas on campus that are under surveillance. And if they're in green, which the majority of these are, 23 of these 25 entities are in green, then basically they're not detecting any presence of the virus. As they go into other categories, if they get into red, there's significant shedding of the virus, and that is what prompts testing for that particular community on campus. Right now, there are 23 in green, 2 are in blue. The blue ones indicate there is some virus present, but not a very significant amount. And this correlates with what we know to be true among positive cases and other indications that I'll get to in a minute, which is currently in the campus context, there's very little virus present, and that's being tested in terms of a positive test. So that's the wastewater testing aspect of the mitigation. There's also the presence of HEPA filters. And so the HEPA filters were installed in all the classrooms by the request of faculty. Now, we all know that these HEPA filters are noisy, right? So we've probably all been in rooms where we've tried to lecture or give presentations in those rooms. And that's one reason why, when possible, using microphones in a classroom is going to be useful. There were some classrooms identified in a recent survey where the units were being unplugged. The administration is aware of this, and we're on sort of a campaign to make sure those units remain plugged in. We're working with facility services on installing outlet covers to make sure they cannot be unplugged. We're also asking facility services if they notice that it is unplugged to plug them in overnight so that they run overnight prior to the next day. One thing we know to be true about these filters is as they run more and more continuously, they do emit noise, but the noise lessens a little bit as they're plugged in. So keeping them plugged in is the best mode of operation for them going forward. The other thing I'd like to do is take you through, apologies for not going through that, but that just repeats what I just said. Again, this will be available for you later on in the presentation itself. I'm going to go briefly through the actual dashboard information that's available on the LSU Roadmap site. Note that you can get to the dashboard by, if you go to the lsu.edu/roadmap, or you can click on COVID Roadmap on the LSU homepage. Here's another illustration of where you can click on that underneath this video message from President Tate. So multiple ways of getting there. And then once you're there, you can access the dashboard in a couple of different ways. Toward the upper left, there's a drop down under COVID-19 resources that takes you to the dashboard. Or at the very bottom, and these are in green rectangles, you can click on the phrase that says view the dashboard. So those are a couple places that you get to the site itself. Currently, again, as was alluded to earlier today, this is what we know about current positive cases. We have 11 cases total across campus, 10 among students, 1 employee, which amounts to 0.03% of the sort of campus population. So extremely low numbers right now of positive cases. I want to point out as well that unlike many of our other university peers, we include both self-reported numbers from students and employees, but also confirmed on-campus test results. So when we get test results from campus testing locations, those are included in these numbers as well. So it's extremely important to know that this information, including the wastewater testing information, gives us a pretty good and accurate depiction of the presence of the virus on campus. If you take a look here, this is the trend since May 9th of this year. So you can see, of course, the totals of positive cases. And then on the right, you see a graph that depicts sort of over time how that has ebbed and flowed. So clearly there was a big spike in cases early in the year. It waned over March and April and into the summer. It spiked up again with the Delta variant, as we all know, early into late in July and then into August. And then since then, over to the farthest right is about where we are now, where those cases have dropped dramatically here on campus. So that gives you a picture of sort of where we're at now presently. In terms of testing, isolation, and quarantine, in terms of the actual tests themselves, we've been getting about 2.6% positive tests of those tested. And then currently, 2 students in isolation and 8 students in quarantine out of the roughly 8,300 students in campus housing right now. So again, just another sort of indication of where things are and the status currently. Another big topic, as we've learned and heard about today, is sort of the vaccination exemption process and testing and mask wearing, for example. So let's, just to be clear, understand what is available to students for this. Students may complete a vaccination form. I've just got an excerpt from the statute about this that was alluded to earlier today. Again, I'm not going to read through this, but it's just sort of available as sort of context for us. Students can complete a vaccination exemption form if they want to opt out for medical or religious reasons. And then the way they do that is they can go through a form. Again, I don't expect you to see this or read this carefully, but this is a form that indicates all the questions that they address and answer as they work through that exemption form itself. So they must indicate on this form that they are exempting at their own risk, that they have reviewed CDC guidance, that they release LSU from any null claims from exposure outbreak or threatened outbreak. They understand that they must comply with assigned testing, and they may be excluded from certain events and activities. And then they sign the document to verify. Now, for employees, there's a sort of a similar process, although this isn't required by state law. But what LSU is doing is allowing employees to opt essentially between either being fully vaccinated or basically opting into a testing regime. So if they're not vaccinated, then they need to go through the testing protocol. Employees do not have to submit a form to the ADA coordinator to be exempt from vaccination. We've been following that practice. It's still available, but technically that does not need to be done. Employees are able to submit proof of the vaccination or will be required to test once a month beginning in November. The testing that is done must be done on campus. So you can't just go to some other community testing center. It must be done on campus so that we can get information to verify it. The other issue that's come up recently is whether and how employees need to sort of justify those. If they want to go through an actual accommodation process to have this registered as an accommodation, for example, for medical or religious reasons, they can do so. So that is considered by the ADA coordinator and can be something that's registered by that office. Students and employees can go through an exemption process for masking or testing. Now, this is a high threshold, high standard that one must get over in order to be exempted from this. So generally, we're talking about folks that have exempted or opted out of vaccinations, therefore they're in the testing regime or testing protocol. This may be a process they can avail themselves of if they believe that shouldn't apply to them either. But again, very high standard for doing that. And those, if it's a medical concern, there must be physician information to back up that claim. Or a medical exemption for testing, for example, or medical exemption for wearing a mask. For students, it has to be, in these kind of cases, similar, a medical condition or a sincerely held or religious belief. These are the forms. Again, you may have seen these. So this is the student form for asking for an exemption for testing and or masking. They have to supply information on the basis for that accommodation on this form. Again, this is not the same as the exemption from vaccination, which has a much lighter threshold. This is a very strict threshold for exemptions for masking and testing. And again, there needs to be a physician certification that it's a medical basis for that request. For employees, there's a similar process. They can use the request packet for request packet due to COVID to request those similar types of exemptions. And again, they're reviewed in the same kind of way. Another matter that we were asked to address is sort of the enforcement of the COVID-19 protocols on campus, so all the sort of the collection and constellation of mitigation efforts that we're engaging in. So the first major requirement was for the entry protocol. So just as a reminder, when students came into campus at the beginning of the fall semester, they were asked to provide either proof of a negative COVID test no more than 5 days prior to arrival on campus, proof of COVID vaccination, or proof of a positive COVID-19 test no more than 90 days prior to that arrival. Students were sent multiple email messages, text messages, automated phone calls to remind them of these protocols. At the end of that whole process, LSU did in fact unenroll 27 students for not meeting these entry requirements. Now that is an extremely small percentage. I don't know why we have 8 decimal places, but you know, it's impressive for some. So clearly a very, very small percentage of students that were affected by this that did not comply. So we're actually very proud of this. This is a great result, I think, for LSU that we retained the majority of our students, the overwhelming majority. Plus, we have, again, another year of record freshman enrollment. So the fact that we were able to retain those students on campus was very good indeed. Then we have the entry of the vaccine mandate itself. So students were asked to comply with this by October 15th of this fall semester to submit their proof of full vaccination or formally opt out, as we discussed before, through the waiver process. And to do that, to formally opt out, they had to register that with the LSU Student Health Center. So the health center has the records on the student exemptions for vaccination. And if students complied with this requirement for vaccination, they retained their priority scheduling assignments. So for spring scheduling, for example. After this deadline passed, students that have not complied are given a hold on their registration, so they cannot register for spring classes. And I can attest to the fact we've gotten a few phone calls from students who were unable to register and were upset about it. So it is important that they comply and that they follow the guidelines, and we're going to hold them to it. Again, partially vaccinated students must also complete the waiver and participate in monthly testing. But at any point, the student can opt into vaccination and verify that with the university to then come out of the testing protocol. Then we have required monthly testing. Students are notified, that actually are in the testing protocol. So they get information about when and where they need to do those tests. Again, the tests are done on campus. And in fact, if they haven't gotten it already, they'll start receiving notifications about when they should start scheduling their tests, actually beginning next week. The first week of November is when the first slate of tests actually starts happening. Failure to comply with the monthly testing requirement for unvaccinated students also constitutes a violation of the LSU Code of Student Conduct. It may impact their ability to remain on campus and participate in certain in-person activities or any in-person activities, depending on the case. There's also a process or a method for reporting mask violations, which, when used, is sent to LSU PD and the EOC, Emergency Operations Center. Mask enforcement personnel are adjusted if needed. In conclusion, I think that the major thing that we would like to impart to you all is that we really have a whole interrelated set of mitigation measures that all work in concert with one another. Each of these has its own sort of pros and cons, its own sort of impact on the overall effort. But I think as a sort of interrelated strategy, what we have is what looks like has been a very successful effort to mitigate COVID risk in the actual presence of COVID on campus. Certainly the ability to detect it through the wastewater system, which is a major boon because we get sort of the leading indicators of that presence in wastewater. So all these sort of work together. The daily symptom checker used for faculty, employees, and students, wastewater testing, testing that's required for unvaccinated individuals, sanitation and cleaning, that especially is done during the day, but also during the evenings between days. Of course, the mask mandate, which LSU has said we're going to stick with this fall semester, despite the governor's announcement the other day. So we are, at least through the foreseeable fall semester, going to continue that mask mandate on an annual basis. And of course, the vaccine mandate, the presence of head adults, again, in the buildings. So I think in conclusion, all of these measures have really helped us get to what we see as a low positivity rate, a pretty high vaccination rate, I think, among students and the employees in general. And I think there are probably questions that we would anticipate of what's this going to look like for the spring. I can tell you now we don't have definite answers on the spring. Some of this is going to depend on sort of the context in which we learn more about over the next month or so. I think we're all going to be interested in looking at what might happen after holiday breaks, like the Thanksgiving break. Will there be any spikes in activity in the virus? So those will all come into play as well. But in general, what we plan to do from academic affairs is hold this same strategy going forward as much as we can. So that's our general intention, is to sort of hold the same kind of constellation mitigation efforts as much as possible. So that's what I have for a presentation. Happy to entertain any questions, and if I can't answer them, I'll try to get you something later on.
So, Adriana Massa from the debate. I just have a question as, have you asked why the HEPA filters are being unplugged? And my reason for asking that is that I was a guest lecturer in one of the buildings in animal sciences, and it was uncomfortably hot in that room, such that I was actually perspiring. And I was told that the HEPA filter had been unplugged because it made the room incredibly uncomfortably hot. And so I agree with these HEPA filters. I'm just saying that you may get more compliance if the AC's turned up as well or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't heard that rationale myself, but clearly I think the main reason is that they are loud and they are annoying. Let's just be frank about it. So in smaller rooms, they have an outsized presence in terms of the noise, and I think that's why they're being unplugged. And they're probably being unplugged in some cases between classes or at the end of days. And again, the idea is that they should remain plugged in, and that'll actually help them operate better.
Well, sure, but I'm just saying in this case it was because of the heat, and there was no microphone in that room actually, so.
Yeah. That's, to me, that's a new one, I haven't heard that one, but that's, I'd be curious to know if that's, the same for others.
My question, I have a question and a comment. The question is, what is the evidence that the HEPA filters make any difference?
Your name, please?
The question is, what evidence, oh, I'm sorry, my name is James Madden.
No.
And
Yeah,
the question is, what is the evidence in support of the use of it?
So the question is, what's the evidence for the use of the HEPA filters at all? So my understanding is that we have actually internal testing done at LSU on that to demonstrate that it actually does have an impact on the quality of the air in the rooms. I don't know the details on that, but that's my understanding. So we have an internal team that's been doing the testing on that within the physical spaces in those rooms.
Can we get a report on that?
I don't know, but I can find out. I will definitely ask that.
And I comment, your percent figure is the fraction, not the percent.
Yeah.
27 over 33,500 is 0.08%, not 0.0008%.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, thank you. Move the decimal point. Yeah.
I don't know if I can ask a question, but can you help me understand why evidence of immunity is not accepted for students when it's in the law?
The simple answer is no, I cannot. I'm not qualified to answer that. But what I would suggest is that I believe what LSU is doing is trying to get at that with at least proof that the person has had COVID within 90 days. That's probably the approximation to that. But otherwise, I don't know any information on what you're asking directly. Sorry.
Peter Dorn from Geology. In your self-reported results, your pie chart for the beginning, what fraction of the student population is that 100, that pie chart is all the students? I know it's not all the faculty.
Yes, all the students. Yeah, so the question is about in the pie charts from before, basically what's the denominator for the information that is all the students? Yeah, all registered students. Yeah, so, sorry, I forget your name, but.
Valerie.
Yeah.
Okay, so first question is, where are students isolated and quarantined for those that are being isolated and quarantined, and how are they treated, and how are they getting food? Are their Tiger cards turned off, and could you give us more details on that?
I unfortunately don't know a lot of details on that. I do understand that what LSU has done is they've reserved some space internally for isolation and quarantine, so that was set aside before the year began. How food is delivered, how those students are cared for in the moment, I unfortunately don't know the answer to that.
Where can we get that information?
We can follow up on that and get information back out to anyone who's been at the meeting today.
Okay, and why are students forced through these protocols and when they're in potentially a room environment like this, but I don't know what the capacity is anymore, but 80,000 people at Tiger Stadium sitting on top of each other don't have to do anything?
I cannot address that.
Okay, well then maybe you can address if vaccines work, why would vaccinated people have any concerns about unvaccinated people? And if they don't work, then why should unvaccinated people take them?
My understanding of it is that at least what vaccines do is help prevent the severity of the disease.
But if that is on the person that is ingesting that medication into their body, why does it have anything to do with you as a vaccinated person?
Because there also is evidence of cases where there are breakthrough cases for those that are vaccinated.
So then why should that person take the vaccine?
Yes.
Or who is allowed to ask questions at this point?
Right, yeah, I think there's been a little miscommunication. Senators are, let's defer to the senators to ask questions, please. Okay. All right, so thank you for your question. We appreciate it.
The May one was not. Nothing for the summer was.
Okay, all right, were there additional questions? Yes.
Mine's Joe Gerber, Butler County. I've been teaching in person since last fall. I did hybrids, full in person. So just some metrics. Let's assume the governor's mandate for masks is still the same as in January. What's the metrics you use to make you have to teach this for class?
So I didn't catch that last part.
What would be the metric you would use to, I'm fully vaccinated, for the record, and I've been teaching in person since last August. I just believe in teaching in person. I believe I add value to the classroom. I mean, speaking for me, it's an individual. So in January, let's assume the governor's mandate is the same for the mask. What would be the metric that LSU would use to tell me I still have to teach with the mask? If the governor's mask mandate is still the same, why would I still be teaching with a mask and I'm fully vaccinated? And I'm assuming 85% of the students are vaccinated. I would feel comfortable teaching without a mask.
Right, okay, so if I understand your question, you're asking about when we get to this coming January.
Correct, and the governor's
There's still no mask, there's still no mask.
Correct. Would LSU's accounting or metric be to say, I still have to teach with a mask, I'm fully vaccinated, and based on your data, 85% of the students are vaccinated? What would be the metric you would say, I still have to teach with a mask?
That I don't know. My suspicion is that if there's no mandate and that can't be applied on campus, there wouldn't be one for anybody.
Right, but I was just in a restaurant Wednesday night and nobody had a mask. I'm not speaking for anybody else. Maybe people will follow, Daenerys to Jon Snow in perpetuity, wear masks forever. Which is your opinion, it's fine. But I was in a restaurant Wednesday night, nobody had a mask. So I'm assuming, I'm assuming nobody's gonna go to a restaurant and eat with people without a mask. So my only question is, if the situation is the same in January, based on your data, I'm vaccinated, 85% of the students are vaccinated, and the governor's mandate is there is no mandate, why would I still be told to teach with a mask?
I don't know that you would.
Okay.
But I can't answer that question without.
Okay.
I mean, clearly there'll be other people making that decision on campus.
Okay, thank you.
Kerry Dooley, Chemical Engineering. I'll also point out, Professor Hicks, that you're not wearing a mask right now, and President Tate took his mask off when he addressed the Faculty Senate last month, and also Vice Provost Cassidy. And you're actually closer to the FSEC right now than I am to my class, to any member of my class when I teach. So I don't see why we're still having to wear masks either.
Yeah, I can
Especially
agree
when
with
we
that.
teach.
Yep.
Can I address that? Because there's a reason, right? The reason that it's not such a big deal for him over there, right, is because of the volume of this room and the length of time he's gonna have his mask on. So even if he were positive and we're putting out SARS-CoV-2, it would be long enough for it to build up so that it would be a problem. But when we're in a smaller room, especially if it's packed to 100 capacity, and we're in there for 80 minutes, and we're speaking loudly, we don't, some of us suppose we don't have a mic, right? Because many of us don't keep the mic if we don't have to. We are loading up that space with virus. And especially if the students, if the mask mandate completely goes away, then the students in that space will be taking in that virus, even if they're at the back of the room. But it's a function of loading up the space and how much time you're in the space. And that's the answer to the question. The space here is so large, and he's not up there without the mask long enough to load it up so that it's an issue for us. If Andy were standing, President Lopez, we're standing right next to him without a mask, then that would be an issue, because he's got a cloud around him right now.
I'm assuming that he's one of the non.028% who doesn't have COVID at LSU, and I'm assuming I'm also one of the non.028% who doesn't have COVID right now at LSU.
Okay, all right, yes, so another question, and then we do need to move on, we have a long agenda, my friend. But we will take, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, I want you to have your questions. But we will take additional questions, and we will forward them to Professor Hicks. You will make these available, and we will forward all additional questions if you think of something later, and he will respond, and we'll distribute that to the Senate. Now, your questions, sir.
So, Madam State Department of Physics, I see that lots of students every day who are not following mask mandate within the 50 feet around various buildings. How many mask violations have been reported? Do you have some data this semester? What was the follow-up?
Yeah.
Criteria following that
Yeah, so the question is about, do we have data on how often the mask violations have been reported? I don't know the answer to that, so that's something I'll have to investigate.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hicks. Could we please have a round of applause? He's a big student. All right, next up, I'm very happy to have, I'm gonna try your name, I'm so sorry. Ms. Rebecca Marchiafava. Okay, Fava. Wow, okay, I'm so sorry. Please introduce yourself again. We're very grateful, but all kidding aside, we're very grateful to have you here. This has been a long time coming. There's no shortage of Title IX issues here. This is something that's been at the forefront of the FSCC for many years, even before it hit the newspapers. So we're very glad to have you here. Please, yes.
All right, thank you so much for having me. I was planning to keep my mask on because I do fall into the immunosuppressed category, but if y'all have any problems hearing me, I can also remove it, so y'all can just let me know. But, yes, let me, is there a way to make it full screen or?
Exactly sure how.
Okay. Full screen. Okay, great. Okay, so today I'm here to speak on the topic of supporting survivors of sexual assault on campus. And I'm here representing STAR, which stands for Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. STAR is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to provide support to survivors of sexual trauma, improve systems response, and create social change to end sexual violence. My name is Rebecca Marchiafava. I am STAR's Training and Technical Assistance Director, and I've been with STAR since 2012, which is the year that STAR incorporated as a nonprofit. Prior to that, we had our origins in the East Baton Rouge Parish District Attorney's Office, going all the way back to 1975. So we do have a pretty long time that we have been present in this community. And over the last almost 10 years, we're coming up on 10 years as a standalone nonprofit. We have gone through a lot of expansion in those 10 years, from about 3 staff members to now over 50 staff members serving 3 regions in Louisiana. These regions are the capital area, so we have a branch in Baton Rouge. We also serve the greater New Orleans area. We have a branch in New Orleans, and our branch in Alexandria serves the central Louisiana area as well. So that's just a little bit about our history, and later on I will go over our services. But first I want to talk about, and just to reintroduce myself, I'm sorry. Yes, I said my name, Rebecca Marchiafava. Some of you may recognize it. My mother actually worked on this campus for over 35 years, and I basically grew up on this campus. So anyway, very good to be here. Who is impacted by sexual violence? We talk about primary and secondary survivors of sexual violence. Primary survivors are those who directly experience that violence. And I do want to acknowledge and recognize that anytime I come into a room to speak on this topic, I have to do so with the awareness that there are individuals in that room, in this room, that have directly experienced this form of violence. When we're talking about secondary survivors, we are talking about friends, family, loved ones of primary survivors. So we recognize that this is a form of violence that does not just impact one individual, it also impacts those who care about that primary survivor. And broadening out our scope from that, sexual violence impacts entire communities. So as you probably are aware, even just as members of the LSU community, you've probably experienced some impacts related to issues around sexual violence, Title IX failures, etc. And then we see these overall community and societal impacts through in a lot of different ways, right? So feelings, fear around a lack of safety existing in the community, economic costs, social costs, there's many costs to the community and society at large. When we're talking about sexual assault on college campuses, a recent study showed that 13% of all students experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation during college. 13% of LSU's current student population is over 4,500 students, so that is a large number of individuals. I can tell you that STAR, since the beginning of 2017, has served 164 clients who were LSU students. And since the beginning of 2021, we've served 44 individuals who are LSU students. So again, with our existence in this community, we have, since our inception, been serving students of LSU. A couple other stats on prevalence. So in this same study, 42% of all students reported experiencing at least one sexually harassing behavior since enrollment, and 19% reported sexually harassing behavior that either interfered with their academic or professional performance. And that's really what a lot of this comes down to, is ensuring access to be able to get an education, complete one's education, perform one's work in a safe environment without the threat or perpetration of violence against them. And this is also why we at STAR focus on a continuum of sexual violence. We are not only focused on the most extreme forms of that violence, but a broader continuum, because we do see that perpetrating behaviors occur along a continuum, and also oftentimes experiences of sexual violence occur along a continuum as well. So when we're talking about or thinking about how do we prevent sexual violence, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that comes back to this issue of the continuum and how we address all of these forms of violation. So what are the needs of survivors of sexual violence? And when I say survivors, I mean people who have experienced sexual violence. We're talking about, one of their first needs is to not have experienced that violence to begin with, right? And so this comes down to preventing the perpetration of sexual violence. And sexual violence is preventable. Survivors need a community that is educated about sexual violence. So many of the issues that we run into when it comes to disbelieving survivors or not providing appropriate support, it comes back to that education piece. Survivors also need support with immediate needs. And so these immediate needs can include crisis intervention services, information about evidence collection and or medical care in the aftermath of an assault. They may need emotional support, oftentimes needing emotional support or benefiting from that. They also may have safety needs, so assistance with developing and implementing safety plans, also with information accessing protection orders. Survivors also need support in navigating systems and processes. This is true for any survivor who is reporting generally to law enforcement or navigating a medical system in the aftermath of an assault or abuse. But when we're talking about sexual assault on college campuses, there's also the issues with academic accommodations, support navigating, leave from classes, all of that. So student financial aid, how that can be impacted by experiencing an assault. And then another need that a lot of survivors have, which connects to our services that I'm going to talk to you about, is legal advice and representation. There are a variety of legal needs that survivors may have after an assault that they may not even know that they need. However, STAR does offer free, confidential legal services to individuals who've experienced sexual violence. So I'll talk about that a bit more. But that connects to what their needs may be and often are after an assault. Survivors also have longer-term needs. So this includes ongoing support, ongoing emotional support, because sexual violence, the reason we're all here talking about it is it impacts people's lives and it causes trauma. And these are very real impacts that we as a community need to take responsibility for, again, preventing on the front hand, but also addressing on the back end. Therapy, right, to cope with the trauma, navigating those impacts, managing trauma symptoms, all of that. And then also financial assistance. There are often individual economic costs that are incurred as a result of experiencing this form of violence. And so having access to financial assistance can be very helpful. And STAR actually does have a program to offer financial assistance to our clients. This is not a comprehensive list, but it is just, some things that I wanted to point out. So as far as resources, when we are talking about encountering someone who is disclosing to us or has reported to us, it is incredibly important to connect that individual with resources and support. So LSU, you may have seen this website or been to this website. I believe Jane Cassidy spoke with you all previously, but this is a website, lsu.edu/support. And if you can see the highlighted Get Support tab at the bottom, that's where you can go, and it has a list of resources that address a range of forms of power-based violence. So not just sexual violence, but also intimate partner violence. And so I do encourage you to check that website out if you haven't already, just to take a look at that list. STAR is one of the resources listed on LSU's support website. Another resource that is listed on the website is LSU's Lighthouse program. And so LSU's Lighthouse program is essentially your in-house advocacy program. So it provides free and confidential interpersonal violence prevention, support, and advocacy to the LSU campus community, and assists student survivors of sexual assault, interpersonal violence, stalking, and harassment. And one of the core things that Lighthouse can provide, again, is assistance with those academic-related accommodations and support navigating campus systems. So I do want to highly recommend connecting students to Lighthouse. As far as STAR services and how those can supplement the services available on LSU's campus, first of all, there are LSU students who may not want to, navigate these systems via an LSU advocacy program. They may want to access support services through both programs or just simply separately through a standalone nonprofit organization. So at STAR, these services, our advocacy, counseling, and legal services, are all available for free, and they are all confidential. We take confidentiality very seriously at STAR. Our advocacy program is basically the first contact for survivors or, primary or secondary survivors when they reach out to STAR. And so our advocates will essentially conduct a needs assessment, do an intake, and be able to identify, what needs is this person presenting with, and how can we connect them to services within STAR, or also make referrals to other organizations if needed. We do have a counseling program that offers individual and group therapy services. And once again, our legal program, which is actually pretty unique in the nation for this type of program. So we are very fortunate. And I don't just say that as a employee of STAR, I say it as a member of this community. We are very fortunate to have a program of this nature in our community. And so again, I think, I do just want to drive home how empowering and important legal representation can be for survivors. Because being a survivor can be a very powerless position to be in. And so this is a way of ensuring that survivors' rights are protected and that survivors are informed about even what their rights are and what legal options are available to them. And these are primarily civil legal services. This does include representation in Title IX cases as well. So in addition to our services for survivors, we also have our part of STAR that we refer to as our social change program. And this program, we actually have our Vice President of Social Change also in the audience, Dr. Tanya Rao. And these services consist of our prevention education services, which are largely focused on youth education and, addressing education around healthy relationships, prevention of sexual violence, healthy behaviors, healthy dating, etc. We also have our training and technical assistance program. As I mentioned at the beginning, I am the training and technical assistance director, and I'm going to go over the details of what we can offer. So when we're talking about training and technical assistance, generally I want to just say, at STAR, we are really invested in supporting institutions and organizations and companies in our communities along this journey to better preventing and better addressing the issue of sexual violence. Again, this is a community issue. STAR alone, it isn't our mission to end sexual violence, but that is not something that we can do alone. And so we look and seek to partner and support these change processes within organizations in our community. As it was mentioned previously, STAR is currently working with LSU. We have active contracts around a variety of projects, and we are working directly and closely with the Title IX office as they continue to implement the recommendations of the Hush-Blackwell report. We've also worked closely with the LSU Athletics Department and have engaged in contracts to provide training and other forms of technical assistance to some other departments as well. So just to kind of go over what these services are in terms of departmental level support to support change processes. Because we recognize this can be changes needed, but it can be very difficult to navigate. None of us are really taught how to do this, and so it's important to come together on that. So we do offer training on these topics. So this includes workplace harassment prevention, which ties to overall prevention of violence by preventing workplace harassment. We do training on the dynamics of sexual violence, coming back to creating a more informed and educated community on this topic, and a more empowered community to take steps to be part of the solution. We provide training on responding to disclosures of sexual harassment and assault, and also on how trauma impacts individuals in the workplace, which can result in burnout and compassion fatigue. So generally providing training around developing healthy workplaces and improving health of individuals in the workplace and workplaces overall. Our technical assistance includes workplace climate and culture assessments to be able to identify, where may improvements be needed. How can we identify, what is working and what may need to be addressed in a given workplace, department, institution, etc. This is actually specifically something that is recommended in the Hush-Blackwell report. It's not part of the big major recommendations at the end, the 18 recommendations, but it is embedded in the recommendations. And they do encourage departmental level climate assessments to drive improvements. We can also conduct and assist with policy and procedure audits, anti-harassment policy and training development, which is actually something that we are partnering with the athletics department on, and coaching for leaders and navigating the challenges that can arise from addressing these issues. And so that is our spiel. I know that there is a lot on the agenda, and I so appreciate being given the time to be here to share about STAR services and other support services that are available. Our website is star.ngo, and this is our hotline at the bottom. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you very much. So as all of us are mandatory reporters now, I think this information is very important. You do offer training at the departmental level. I became familiar with Ms. Marchiafava at a training, and so I hope that you'll take her up on the opportunity or look into, if you feel that it's appropriate. Well, I'm sure it is. If you feel like that you can implement it in your department or college. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, next up, we have a second reading of Resolution 2106, a call to bring LSU's vaccination mandate conformity with state law and national guidelines. As it has already been moved into discussion, we'll read it again and then we'll take a vote.
Madam President, in the interest of time, we would like to postpone that resolution until next month.
We have to have so.
All right?
Because it's part of the agenda, we must vote on postpone.
All right, is there a motion to postpone the second reading of Resolution 2106?
Second.
Okay, we'll need to take the vote by roll. All right. Members of the FCC will call out your name. Please say yea or nay, whether or not you vote in affirmation of a postponement. That is, in favor of a postponement. All right. Jeff Davis. Lauren Lazaro.
Point of order, could you just remind me, which resolution are we postponing?
2106, 2102, I'm sorry, I didn't mention it, has already been postponed. 2106, a call to bring LSU's vaccination mandate into conformity with state law and national guidelines. Okay. Ian Negulescu. Heather Kirk Ballard. Yay. John King. Yay. Kevin Ringelman.
Yay.
Lisa Fultz.
Yay.
Robert Holton. Derek Ostrenko. Whaley Song.
Yay.
Robert Newman. Roy Heidelberg.
Yay.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Yes.
Okay. Joseph Lagoria.
Yes.
Janan Wu.
Yes.
Matthew Hyatt.
Yes.
Thomas Stewart.
Yay. Yay.
Steve Short.
Yes.
Leah Daniel Grace. Marla.
Yes.
Jerry Knapp. William Mohammed.
We can't hear you.
You gotta talk into the mic, please. Okay, just one moment. Okay, those online, we have to call your name as well. So, we can hear you. So when your name is called, please answer yea or nay.
Karen Dooley.
Nay.
Paul Walter.
Nay.
Sandra Chen. Edward Gibbons.
Yay.
Michael Martinez.
Yay.
Pam Blanchard.
Yay.
Carlos Lee.
Judy Wright. Yay. Muhammad Abdullah.
Yes.
Fernando Perez.
Yay.
James Keenfield.
Yay.
Duncan Stewart. Chantal Chizian. Yay. Jason Harmon.
Yay.
Daniel Tyron.
Yay.
Rosemary Peterson.
Yay.
Meredith Feldman.
Yay.
Kari Rifin,
Yay.
Hannah Raji, Lori Favela,
Yay.
Matthew Freeman. Zach Roman,
Sarah Pepin Roser.
Yay.
Mark Wagner. Elizabeth Carter. John Church.
Yay.
John Miles.
Yay.
Bob Mann.
Yay.
Tara Houston.
This is Alan Sykes. I've taken over Carrie Houston's position as of effectively today for the rest of the academic year, and I'm okay.
Inessa Mazzara Faye. Hannah Balakovitz.
Yay.
Wei Quan Wang. Peter Duran.
Yay.
Shane Sandler.
Yay.
Robert Cook.
Yay.
William Derler.
Yay.
Jake Heselton,
Yes.
Scott Baldridge,
I'm Charles Belzell, I'm who's alternate for today, so, yes.
James Madden,
Yes.
Tarapreet Singh,
Yay.
Kurt Bryan, Arthur Penn, Sanathan B. Oh boy, I apologize. J.S. Thielen,
That would be, is Professor Del Piero still there? Right, you're the alternate for
Yay.
him.
Thank you.
Okay.
Adriano Vaca,
Nay.
All right, that's it. Okay, well, I can see that the majority voted yay. We will get the exact tallies, however. Is there any opposition to moving forward with the agenda? We'll get the final tally. All right, we'll take that by consensus. So first, new business is the first reading of Resolution 2107, a resolution commending faculty grassroots collective action, sponsored by Senators Rosemary Peters, or Professors Rosemary Peters Hill and Kevin Ringelman.
Okay, a resolution commending faculty grassroots collective action. Whereas during the spring and summer of 2021, the LSU A&M faculty engaged in an unprecedented level of grassroots collective action in the service of the campus community. And whereas, following the administration's underwhelming response to the Faculty Senate resolution calling for mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations to ensure a safe campus environment for the fall 2021 semester, over 125 faculty members exercised the right of the faculty to call a meeting of the Faculty Council. Whereas this historic meeting was a tremendous success, with over 800 attendees and a Faculty Council resolution calling for mandatory vaccinations or appropriate mitigation measures on campus, receiving overwhelming support from 90% of the 636 faculty members who voted. And whereas the LSU Board of Supervisors, following discussion of the Faculty Council resolution, passed a resolution asking the Louisiana Department of Health to add COVID-19 vaccines to a schedule of mandatory vaccinations when they became fully approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And whereas, throughout the summer of 2021, faculty volunteers sought both to ensure a safe campus environment for the fall 2021 semester and to assert faculty governance through multiple actions, including, but not limited to, advocating for the inclusion of both subject matter experts and teaching faculty on the decision-making bodies, providing public comments at the Board of Supervisors meeting in Alexandria in June and Baton Rouge in August, defending academic freedom as set forth by PS 15 when challenged by the administration, circulating legal opinions written by LSU Law Center faculty that argued that there were no legal impediments to LSU mandating COVID-19 vaccinations, even while the vaccines were under emergency use authorization, EUA status, and that LSU's legal arguments preventing the upper administration from imposing a vaccine mandate were inaccurate. Drafting and circulating a petition calling for LSU to return to COVID-19 mitigation procedures from fall 2020 that received nearly 350 faculty signatories in 48 hours and was submitted to the Board of Supervisors via public comment at its meeting in August, highlighting the desires of faculty and the dangers to the campus community through open letters and other coverage in the Advocate, LE Illuminator, Inside Higher Ed, and the Chronicle of Higher Education, along with other publications, as well as television appearances on WBRZ and radio interviews on WRKF. And whereas faculty diligence led to public demands that LSU both clarify and demonstrate equity in its COVID-19 accommodation policies. And whereas prompt faculty grassroots action called attention to and forced the tabling of a proposed LSU Board of Supervisors resolution to abolish the Faculty Council as a deliberative body. Therefore, be it resolved that the LSU Faculty Senate commends the faculty who have dedicated themselves to collective efforts aimed at improving the welfare and safety of the campus community during this period. And therefore, be it further resolved that the LSU Faculty Senate endorses collective faculty efforts to exercise our role in shared governance and directs the administration and Senate leadership to recognize them as appropriate and important. And therefore, be it further resolved that when official administrative bodies on campus do not represent faculty's health, safety, and best interests, the Faculty Senate recognize the right of the Faculty Council to meet and speak as the voice of the faculty.
All right. Thank you. Is there a motion to move this into discussion?
So moved.
And a second? All right, very good. It's open for discussion. Please raise your hand and identify yourself. Do you have any questions or thoughts? Professor Delgado?
Yes, well, let's see, first, therefore, I can't honestly say, I like the activists, I think they're good people, and I know many of them, and they're my friends, but I do not commend their activism on this topic. I wish they would take the jab quietly and leave me alone, because basically they are trying to get other people fired, they're trying to get students expelled, and this is not something I commend. Second, directing the administration, and the second, therefore, to directing the administration and Senate leadership to recognize collective faculty efforts as appropriate and important. I'm not sure what that means. I think it's vague, but whatever it may mean, I think the faculty collective should remember the Senate Constitution, which declares such power to determine educational policy shall be exercised by the Senate at any and all times when the Faculty Council is not in session. The Senate shall represent the Faculty Council in all matters and shall be deemed to voice the policies, opinions, and sentiments of the Council on any matter within its jurisdiction. And I think that the activists should also recall the regulations of the Board of Supervisors, which says that the Faculty Council may delegate its own authority over educational policy to an elected Senate. So when it comes to policy making, I think elected faculty should have more to say than unelected faculty. Now, I've been on both sides of this. Back in 2005, approximately, I was an officer for the LSU chapter of the AUP, the Association of University Professors, and that too is a kind of a, you could say, a faculty collective that's not elected by any other faculty. They're just self-members. They join if they want. And sometimes we had some disagreements with the faculty senate. We presented our case, and they had their opinions, and they were fine. But I didn't expect that the AAUP would be granted the same status as the Senate, or that the Senate has to recognize the AAUP as being somehow superior to other members of the faculty who are not in the AAUP. So anyway, I have some sympathy. I've been partly there myself. And finally, let's see. Yeah, the third, therefore, that the Faculty Senate should recognize the right of the Faculty Council to meet and speak as the voice of the faculty, implies that the Senate has not recognized the right of the Faculty Council to meet and speak. And first of all, I wasn't involved in anything going on last spring when the Faculty Council was meeting. I don't know what happened there, but I can say that I question the need for the faculty council to have met at that time, but even so, the Senate has no say in whether the council meets or not, according to the regulations of the Board of Supervisors, and I quote, each faculty or faculty council, when they say faculty, they mean department faculty or college faculty or campus faculty. Any one of these faculty bodies shall meet at least once each academic year at the call of the president as chair, or of the chancellor of the campus, or for LSU, the president's designee as vice chair, or among the written request of 50 members or 20% of membership, whichever is smaller. So in May, whenever this was happening, the activists who wanted a faculty council meeting should have bypassed the Senate altogether and gone straight to the LSU president. So I think this resolution might have that chain of command a little bit confused, that's all. I know.
Okay, so I'm taking 3 points, 3 major points from this. One, you would prefer a different word as opposed to commend in the first therefore?
Well, I might say we do
Do
not.
you have a different word to suggest? I mean, that,
Yeah, I'm basically opposed to the whole resolution, so
I don't think that as faculty at LSU, we are required to agree 100% on every single word choice or even issue. I don't agree with people who disregard the vaccine, but I commend their right to express that opinion, okay? So you don't have to agree that we commend faculty who spoke out for the safety of faculty. You see what I mean?
Or spoke out for firing other faculty.
I'm sorry?
Or you don't have to commend people who spoke out for firing other faculty.
I don't recall any discussion of firing other faculty. Did you have a question?
Daniel Jerome, Political Science. I can expressly say, as someone who's familiar with the activists, that that was never an intention of the movement, was the firing or the expulsion of any students. So to suggest otherwise would be a mischaracterization of what occurred.
Well, all I know is the mandate letter I got from the president in August, it said termination.
Okay, well, I'm happy for this discussion. Are there any suggestions for amendments or any questions, et cetera? Yeah.
Joe Murray of Florida County. My concern is the last statement. What if a subset of the faculty, under the jurisdiction of the faculty council, make statements that don't represent those of us who don't agree with what they're saying? So the faculty senate, at least, I'm elected in the college. I served in the Senate 10 years ago, and this was the biggest issue back then. I think Liz, Kevin, you were kicking back then. This was the biggest issue. I was elected then. Whaley, you're elected for finance. I don't know if Bob from economics is here, but we were elected. And then if someone had a problem with us, they would tell us. But when people go off on the summer and fire off in social media and say the athletic director is running the university over to be president, I'm a CPA, so just from professionalism, those kind of statements don't represent me. So.
So I think
You say a cohort or a subset, but you're using the faculty council, a subset from other areas of the campus who may have issues.
the faculty council is all faculty on the campus.
Correct, but but you're using this to say, when there was a meeting, I knew nothing about these meetings, and then you're going out saying things under the banner of faculty council, but that doesn't represent everybody. There's 1,700 people in the faculty council.
Okay, so maybe we need to add some wording about the right to create a dissenting opinion.
That's
You
fine.
wear your dissent collar.
Like you have a 10-year decision where you have a majority and a minority opinion, that's fine. Just make sure you're saying you're representing a group who are signing this, and the rest of the people are either by their own vote abstaining or it's a no. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I think that we can reword this last therefore to reflect the fact that there could be a dissenting opinion. And that also represents the faculty.
It represents a subset of that.
I think
If I vote for tenure and somebody votes against tenure, I'm representing the people who support a candidate, the people who are voting against the candidate, representing a different opinion. They're both, but we're not saying the same thing. So I'm against the resolution. I think they're doing a really cool job. That's just, and I think the faculty senate is the place where people are elected to speak on behalf of the faculty. But that's just my take on it. But you're using that last statement saying on the faculty council, that's inclusive. I may not agree with that subset that met in the spring, we're going out, going after the new president. The guy just got off just arrived at Baton Rouge and people were calling him out. I mean, good Lord.
Okay. Additional questions? Suggestions for amendments? All right, well, this is the first reading of, yes, sir.
John Miles, library. I have a question, in that there seems to be floating around this resolution as to who is actually being congratulated. And I think that might bring some clarity to the resolution. So I've been a part of that group at some times until I was not anymore. It's not clear who it is. And so a vague statement like this might be made stronger, pointing to who you are congratulating, and implicitly who you are saying you have to.
Additional
I'm sorry, do you mean in terms of like a name of the people, the names of people who were participating in faculty council over the summer?
That would be one way to do it. The other way to do it would be I believe mine or the faculty council organizing group that was going on it. But there are names that can be used, and the resolution does not use those, which seems odd.
I think I can answer that somewhat by saying that we had the faculty council organizing group in here, but removed it because it wasn't just the organizing group. There was an email list of 125 people who were active in disseminating the information and speaking to other people and getting their departments on board and, or getting their departments involved in the first place. So it would be difficult to list all 125 of those. I mean, we could. That makes the resolution take a little more, a few more pages. But also it was, there were a lot of people who weren't specifically named as part of the organizing group of the faculty council, but who participated in votes and in the email exchanges. And some people voted without leaving their names and stuff, So, I mean, there is value, I think, in recognizing the value of collective action without singling out individual faculty members. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. In no way do I want to distract from the work that was done. Absolutely not. I think it's good. I think it's absolutely good that we're kind of recognizing it. But if it is such a large group, I think if we think outside of this room, it might sound a little self-congratulatory. It might come out as the faculty senate voted to say that the faculty senate did a good job. And that seems to me like it might not be the best way to represent ourselves. I'm not really certain about that. Like, I'm putting this forward hesitantly, but I just worry about how that's going to play in this discussion.
Well, I think the difficulty we have with making it specific is that then it is saying, oh, we did such a good job, this group of people. And it limits it to one time. Whereas commending a grassroots collective action by the faculty leaves the door open so that it can happen again if necessary, when necessary.
But you're specific about what you're commending. So you can't then say, like, it's a non-specific commendation of grassroots action. Like, you can't do one and then the other.
Okay. Do you have an amendment to suggest, like a specific part where you would like to add that in?
I think if you want to talk about the specific, I think one way to narrow it would be to talk about the specific incident, like the research that went into the understanding. I mean, none of us understood what the faculty council was 6 months ago. Right? The move that went into that, the way in which people around the university came into that and got that meeting and moved that meeting forward, I think that is the incident we seem to be talking about. And I think that we could all agree that that was a good thing. Well, I agree. I'm not.
I agree with you.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk? But I don't know how to do this in terms of the point of order. Do we?
So it's not a specific amendment, and so I would suggest that you consult and make the revision. We'll distribute it prior to the next meeting, but he's not making any specific amendments, so I think you're all right to accept this counsel.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone online? I don't even know where to look. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, the first reading, Resolution 2108, an expression of no confidence in selected members of the Faculty Senate leadership, sponsored out by Professors Brault, Joy, Mann, Jerome, Regis, and Felton.
Colleagues, the recent faculty activism precipitated by the pandemic has highlighted two powerful truths. The first is that when the faculty work together to advance our interests, we can achieve tremendous successes.
Sir, you're here to stand and read the resolution first?
Point of order, all resolution sponsors have been afforded the privilege of providing introductory remarks.
Yes, you may want to keep them brief, but
Yeah,
carry on.
thank you. I'll be as brief as I can. The second is that there are significant problems with the leadership that represents us. That means that all too often we have accomplished our goals despite leadership rather than because of it. Extensive documentation supports these assertions, and we have a handout that will be available after my comments are concluded. The majority of these problems can be traced back to the way Senate leadership over time has altered not only adherence to the policies of the Senate, as set forth in its Constitution and bylaws, but also their practices, particularly in their approach to engaging with the faculty they are charged with representing. Within the Senate, this consolidation is a direct violation of the principles and rules laid out in those documents. They make it clear that the role of the president is primarily administrative. They are to preside at meetings, represent the Senate to the administration and other bodies, and have administrative responsibility for the Faculty Senate office. They are not to have a significant role in policymaking, and in fact surrender their Senate seats and consequently their votes upon their election. The decision-making power of the Senate is instead vested in the body itself, and for some tasks in the Faculty Senate Executive Committee as a whole. However, all too frequently, the Senate and FSCC have been excluded from performing their defined roles. In a summer filled with major issues and decisions, the FSCC did not hold a single vote. The president made important decisions on its behalf. The FSCC also was not consulted or informed on other matters of consequence, such as questions faculty might have wanted to have presented at the June Faculty and Staff Forum on how COVID would affect the fall semester. This was true to such an extent that some members of the committee were surprised to learn at the beginning of the forum that the president would be participating. The FSCC also did not take actions which would have enabled senators and other faculty to keep themselves informed of its activities, e.g. keeping minutes of its summer meetings or engaging in regular communication with membership. Leadership has also erected barriers to faculty participation in governance. When a group of engaged faculty requested a meeting with the FSCC to discuss faculty participation in the President's Committee on the implementation of the Faculty Council resolution, leadership repeatedly denied requests to hold the meeting online to allow for increased safety and greater participation. They instead insisted on meeting in person in a room that would limit the number of attendees and increase the possibility of COVID exposure. In addition to the fact that this approach violated LSU policies in place at the time, which limited in-person meetings to 9 participants or fewer, the president refused to allow for virtual participation for a faculty member who has an ADA accommodation that stipulates entitlement to this option, only relenting after multiple interventions by the Office of Civil Rights. This is only one instance of numerous cases where leadership had an opportunity to choose to engage with faculty and faculty participation, and instead opted for obstruction. This antipathy to faculty efforts to advance our interests came to a head on the issue of the proposed revisions to the Board of Supervisors regulations, which would have removed the ability of the Faculty Council to act as a deliberative body on all matters, save the structure of its decision-making. The FSCC leadership clearly understood that this would be the result of the proposal. Vice President King commented to that group that it also seems that they are allowing the Faculty Senate to act on behalf of the faculty as a whole. So there is no Faculty Council per se. The only thing that is strange is this part. Why would the faculty replace or reconstitute the representative body? To which President Lopez responded, the BOS, it seems, wants to make it clear that issue is the only one that they will hear outside of the elected faculty leadership. That is, to dissolve the current governance structure. Such a fundamental and historic change in shared governance should have been shared with the Senate and the Faculty Council. But leadership not only neglected to provide notice, but even took steps to hide these urgent developments from affected parties. President Lopez forwarded communication from the administration only to selected officers of the FSCC, excluding the 2 at-large members, one of whom was notably active in faculty advocacy over the summer. Furthermore, the issue was omitted from the agenda for the FSCC meeting at which it was ultimately discussed, and that discussion, shockingly, only occurred informally at the end. Compounding the egregiousness of this behavior is the fact that the proposed revisions would have removed the ability of the Faculty Council to overrule policy decisions by the Senate and FSCC, presenting a conflict of interest for these officers. In addition, they not only did not communicate with the Senate or the broader faculty, but they apparently took no actions to oppose these proposed changes. Furthermore, they took no steps to defend faculty from what they understood to be a retaliatory action by the board for our advocacy, as evidenced by past President McMillan's statement that sources have indicated that the BOS regulation revisions are a direct rebuke of this group of faculty and their actions. As we survey the evolving landscape of higher education, it is clear that faculty must take an active role in the governance of our institutions or risk seeing our voices irrevocably minimized. It is incumbent upon us to undertake the necessary reforms of our Senate to increase representation and reverse the backsliding that has eroded our standing over time. The process will require some difficult decisions, but will move us to a better future where faculty are heard and respected, the Senate functions as it was intended, and we have representatives who fight for rather than against us. That process begins now with the following resolution. LSU A&M Faculty Senate Resolution 2108, an expression of no confidence in selected members of the Faculty Senate leadership. Whereas the current president, vice president, and past president have implemented a series of formal and informal changes to the policies and practices of the Faculty Senate that have centralized decision-making and diminished faculty representation in and oversight of the Faculty Senate, the Faculty Council's delegated representative body. And whereas these changes have diminished the ability of the Faculty Senate to execute its core functions and put it at odds with the principles, practices, and procedures laid out in its Constitution and bylaws. Whereas these changes result in situations where these officers exercise authority without accountability. And whereas these changes have led these officers to ignore or oppose efforts by LSU faculty to participate in shared governance at the university and to advocate for the faculty's interests through both the Senate and outside channels. And whereas the dismissal and rejection of a petition signed by nearly 350 faculty members advocating for safer working conditions is one of the more egregious examples of this sort of opposition by these officers. And whereas these officers, upon becoming aware of the proposed changes to the LSU Board of Supervisors regulations, which would fundamentally alter shared governance at the university, withheld this information from certain members of the FSCC. And whereas these officers were obligated to disclose these proposed changes to the Faculty Council and the Senate, its delegated representative, due to a conflict of interest arising from the fact that they would remove the ability of the Faculty Council to provide oversight for their actions. And whereas these officers nonetheless did not disclose these proposed changes to the Faculty Council or Senate, and also, as demonstrated by correspondence, took no steps to oppose them. And whereas these officers also understood and conveyed to others that it was likely that the actions of the Board of Supervisors were undertaken as retaliation against the faculty for its activism during the summer of 2021, and did nothing to defend the faculty they are elected to represent. Therefore, be it resolved that as a consequence of these actions by the President, Vice President, and past President, the LSU Faculty Senate has no confidence in these officers' ability to execute the duties of their offices and request their resignations effective immediately. And therefore, be it further resolved that the Senate shall hold new elections for the vacated post at its earliest opportunity, with the Faculty Senate Secretary to fulfill the duties and obligations of the President until that time.
All right, is there a motion to move this resolution into discussion? Yes, Professor Lotta, and a second. Yes, yes, Professor Rosemary Pizza. Okay, so open for discussion.
Well, irrespective of whether I oppose or support this resolution, I oppose it, but I think that
Can you talk on it?
I said that, can you clarify in that first paragraph what the formal and informal changes to the policies and practices of the Faculty Senate that have been made that have led to this first paragraph? I think we need state what they would be more specific, because it remains a generalized statement that I can't make a judgment on.
Sure, so specific examples, the Constitution designates the ability to make a committee appointments to the FSEC as a body. Current at-large members have not been involved in decision-making in terms of appointments on these committees. Furthermore, FSEC is itself charged with setting the agenda. The president is charged with providing the agenda, but the FSEC at large is charged with setting the agenda. The FSEC does not receive the agenda until the day before, or at least the at-large members do not. So there have been multiple instances that we have other documentation that we can provide that shows that informally what has happened is that the FSEC as a body has been silent. I think the best example of this is the exclusion of the 2 at-large members from the decision, right? I mean, all elected members of the FSEC are equal standing in the body and have equal voice. So to the extent that they are not included in deciding to whom to be appointed to committees, to the fact that they are not allowed to participate in setting the agenda in a meaningful way. In fact, the 2 at-large members were not included in the drafting of the charges for the ad hoc committees, and they were not given voice in the participation of the naming of those individuals. They put names forward, and those names were declined by the president. So there is not deliberation that occurs within the FSEC, and part of that is that there are no votes that occur within the FSEC. And so how can their voices be included if they are continually overridden, and there are no votes that are recorded to represent the will of the members of the FSEC as is clear from the Constitution and bylaws as required?
I'd like to address that issue.
Sure.
You're saying that none of the faculty senate executive committee is having input into making committee recommendations. If you look at every email that we sent the past several months, we've been trying to get committee members for all the standing committees. Now, we approve them, each one of us individually approves them. Everybody sitting up here. Whenever there's an issue that comes up, we all discuss the issue. We all decide how to address the issue, like the issue with the board of supervisors. When Mandy received that, she asked the main officers for their thoughts about what is this really trying to do. And we were concerned about it, trying to get rid of faculty representation, which is what everybody's concerned about. Nobody wants to see the faculty not have representation towards the administration. And we talked about that, the whole faculty senate executive committee, except for Jeff because he wasn't there. And it was decided that Mandy was going to talk to Jason Brody, who drafted the wording on that, to find out where it came from and what was going on.
And that meeting was after the Board of Supervisors meeting
No,
in the morning.
this was the meeting before.
Can I do something like that?
Sure.
I'm the secretary, and I just want to correct the record. So reality is administration did not give Randy any time to respond. If you saw the email that came to her from the provost, it came like around 9 or 10 on Thursday. The email came to her from provost office around 9 or 10 in the morning. And the meeting of the board of supervisors was the next day. She forwarded that email right away to us, saying that this is a problem. We are trying to diminish the voice of the faculty. What can we do about it? And then we met that afternoon at 3. And everybody, except for Jeff, was not elected yet as part of the council to discuss it. And we were all appalled and very angry about it. The problem that Nancy faced was that this didn't come from us, it came from the president's office, from Jason Brody. And we kept looking at every word saying that she needs to go and do 2 things. First, talk to Jason Brody before that gets to the board of supervisors meeting. Second, go to the actual board of supervisors meeting and give public comments in opposition of the changes in the bylaw. And I believe enough after that sent the information to the whole faculty senate so that everybody was informed. I personally received an email from the secretary of the Alabama faculty senate who was telling me what can we do to support so that she won't fall into this problem. And I think that was good because that made the administration take a step back. And when they took a step back, the bylaws were not even discussed and they were removed from the agenda completely. So I don't think anything that happened that day was intentionally a conflict of interest. on behalf of Mandy or anybody else. It was like, we were given something on the spot. Let's make a decision right away. Maybe what Inessa did could have been done 3 or 4 hours earlier, but that's the only thing that could have been done.
Can I, if I may, I'm Inessa Badai, I introduced myself earlier. Yes, we were all appalled by this news that day, but what was even more appalling, Marva currently characterized it. However, what was left out is that we were told by the president that there's nothing we could do. The Board of Supervisors has made up their mind, and this is how they act. And I was personally very appalled by the reaction from senior membership that she wasn't blowing the whistle and emailing all of you to stand up and do something about this. So I took the initiative to email the entire Senate with the help of some colleagues. Meredith was in attendance that day at the EPSEC. And it was thanks to our efforts to email as many faculty as we knew, including the entire Senate membership. And thanks to Bob Mann's very powerful public statement the next day at the Board of Supervisors, that very document, the revisions were tabled. And I will tell you, I wholeheartedly support this resolution. I've been elected, those of you who continue from last year, I was elected this past April to this executive committee. I've been really shocked at how things are run. Most decisions are made behind closed doors. We are let know of after the fact. We haven't voted on a single item for the past 6 months as a committee. And that's deeply troubling. It's deeply troubling to me. And if this continues, I don't know how this body can continue to represent us in the best interest that it was elected to represent all of you and larger faculty membership. So I really hope that we can move forward and start a clean slate and invest our time and efforts in people who really do care about our faculty and represent us in the best light, and really collaborate with others to do what's right for us, and claim our place at the table with the higher administration.
And Marwa, if I may just a point of fact, the email from Matt Lee that had the updated revisions was received by President Lopez at 6:15 on Wednesday, and was forwarded to the officers at 7:40 Wednesday evening, asking that the officers please keep it confidential. And it then wasn't mentioned to the members at large until at the conclusion of the meeting on Thursday.
I'm not double check, but you can search me.
I have the email right in front of me.
So the Board of Supervisors meeting was Thursday, not Wednesday?
No, the Board of Supervisors meeting was Friday. So the initial email communication came in Wednesday evening from Matt Lee, and that said, essentially, here are the updated revisions. Andy says, okay, thanks. And then about an hour later, she forwards it to the officers of the FSCC, but not to the members at large. So it was 2 days before, not the day preceding the meeting.
Yes, is that
Yes.
a question?
Yeah, I'm Mike Martinez with School Kinesiology. One thing I think I don't really know where I stand on this right now, but I do think that this whole thing kind of makes us look like we're inept as the back of the Senate. The reason I say that is because we voted for those positions, I believe, in April. And I don't know if memory serves correct, but I don't think anybody else ran for president. And it was just one of those things where if it will do it. I would recommend that somewhere in there, we basically said, starting from the spring or August 4th, that's, kind of like, not necessarily overly specific saying we did 1 or 2 things, but the way this reads is we keep voting in people that we have no confidence in, and at least that's my perspective. So I would be a little bit more specific in terms of when these things happened, whether it was August 4th, 2021, or if it was in the spring when everything happened. Because if this is the body that elected them and no one ran against in the spring, then we're gonna have to have people step up. what is included in here actually happens.
Yeah, and I thank you for the comment. I agree. I think 2 points. One, I think the stakes were raised over the summer in a way that brought greater attention to what had been going on. And we've had sort of the privilege of being able to be inattentive for a long time. And that was no longer the case. And I think it did then bring some of this out to the open that we didn't know before, which is some of the impetus for the change, I believe. And I think you are also right that there is an onus on us as a faculty to become more active in our own affairs. And I think that's something that ultimately, I think most of the faculty would agree. The challenges are mounting as we're seeing elsewhere, and we just can't afford to be lax in our participation. And so we need to pay attention, we need to be engaged, we need to be active, and we need to familiarize ourselves with the levers of administration and how our affairs are governed, so that way we can achieve the best outcome we possibly can. Yes.
So, everyone, I may have misunderstood this because I'm new to the faculty senate, but as I understand,
I can't hear you in the back.
as I understand the whole issue to dismiss the faculty council was a moot point because it would have meant firing all of us. I mean, if you dissolve a council, it means you dissolve the employees, you dissolve the faculty, you have to fire them all. So it was a stupid resolution because it couldn't be implemented. And the fact that the FEC dealt with this, I'm only too grateful that they did. I mean, Professor Lopez is an extremely busy person, and so is everybody else, and we expect them to give importance and credence to things that are really of importance, not things that are, figments of people's imagination, as far as I understood. Now, I could be wrong, so please correct me, but that's my answer.
So the the Board of Supervisors regulations cannot dissolve the faculty as a body. I mean, that is obvious. We won't have a university anymore if you dissolve the faculty. It was a substantive change in how the faculty can govern ourselves and how we participate in governance. What the Board of Supervisors regulation was proposing to do is deny the Faculty Council the ability to meet as a deliberative body for the determination of policy, and would only give the Faculty Council collectively the ability to set the rules for decision-making and delegate authority to a single body. So there were significant changes in the manner of representation at LSU, and that is why Dr. King and Dr. Lopez both acknowledged that this is a fundamental change in the structure of governance at the university.
Can we put the board of supervisors thing up for you, Lala?
Oh, we actually have a copy, so we can hand that out to folks. And the other thing is that, so to say this is a figment of people's imaginations, this was just last Friday, that it's two members of the FSCC.
Please, reword as appropriate. I probably bad word choice today.
No, but I mean,
a point that couldn't be implemented.
Sure. I mean, I just want to show that, this is not, there's no subtext here, there is no ulterior motive. There is genuine concern because we do believe that there's a degree of centralization and exclusion. And Dr. McMillan on Friday emailed the members of the FSCC who had been asking about how procedures are executed on the committee and said, too many of you are acting like third graders, counting and bullying when you don't get your way. For the past 15 years, the FSCC has made decisions through consensus, not by majority rule. There are no guidelines for when the FSCC will meet, and if a stressed and overworked highest elected official leader like Mandy continues to be antagonized by petty issues, she might just decide to become more dictatorial and not schedule any more FSCC meetings. I mean, we could not have put it any better. This is the issue, that those we have elected to represent us at this body are not giving due deference to all of the representatives, and they are not giving due deference to us, and that is why we believe that this resolution is important.
I'd like to correct something that I think in essence that I never heard Mandy say. I never heard Mandy say that the board of supervisors would not listen to us. I just heard Mandy say, and we discussed, and no one on the faculty senate executive committee said anything else, and Meredith Bellman was at this meeting also. Nobody suggested that we go immediately to the board and say, hey, you can't do this. The decision was to go directly to the person that wrote the language and find out what exactly was going on. Do you care to say something?
Well, no, I think I've addressed this in my president's remarks before. What we decided to do at the FSCC meeting, and yep, I did contact him and I met with him subsequently. If there were more comments? More hands?
Kerry Dooley, Chemical Engineering. There's another substantive charge that I've heard that's not part of the resolution, where it was said that there were decisions taken behind closed doors for the last 6 months that did not include all the members of the Faculty Senate Executive Committee. And I'd like to give the FSCC a chance to defend itself and say, if such decisions were taken, what were those decisions?
I don't know. Marla was the secretary. Were there any decisions made behind closed doors?
I hate the fact that we are looking on these types of issues. My perspective is, the way that we've been running, I've been on the council for like 3 years now, this is the 3rd year. The way we discuss the issue and then everybody speaks their opinion and we reach consensus. We never actually vote, I want this, but we do reach consensus. The email that Daniel just read, that Kenton was sent, because we were deciding whether we should meet in person or on Zoom for the small faculty senate executive meeting. I mean, the issue was too small and too trivial for it to be discussed like the way we're discussing it right now. That's my perspective. And the other part that's hidden is, I do applaud President Lopez. She works diligently. She spends so many hours trying to fight for the faculty, from small things to big things, from the student taxes to raises to meeting with the administration on issues that arise every now and then. She served on the EOC all of last year to resolve COVID issues. And I believe that she has built, or the whole, even before I joined, the whole faculty senate executive committee has built a working relationship with the administration. Because I'm recalling a year and a half ago when COVID started, the first thing they did was, before coming up with issues to close campus, open campus, change online classes, they requested all of us to come meet with the provost and the vice provost for academic affairs, and we had an open discussion. What can be done? What does faculty need? What resources can we provide, from taking computers at home to other things? And this is a good thing. That's what shared governance is all about, to help protect the faculty. Will I agree with Daniel saying we could do more transparency and report more to life? Yes, we could do that. And we can agree together that this is something we can do moving forward. One thing that we have been going towards this from the beginning is broadcasting emails, for example. The Faculty Senate Executive Committee doesn't have a right to broadcast emails to faculty. We have been fighting with VP for communication at LSU to give us that access, and we recently were able to, they provided us with an email where we can send things to the whole faculty. We cannot get responses this way, but we can get responses by sending things to the senators, and then the senators can give feedback. So we can work on improving the transparency and sharing more information about what happens in the weekly FSCC meetings with the whole faculty senate. And I don't think Nancy would disagree with that. Would you agree?
What? Oh, no, I think we've made a lot of progress toward posting our agendas, posting our minutes, and so on. This hasn't been done before in the history of the FSCC that I'm aware of. So, no, I agree. I think the question was, has there been decisions made behind closed doors, Marla?
I would say no. I would really say no. Any major decision that involves faculty input was sent to the faculty, from things like, let's create a survey to see what the faculty needs. Let's see what the faculty wants to solve this problem. And we actually need that, because we can't go to the administration and say, we think this is the best solution. You have to come and say, the whole faculty, whether it's the Senate or the Council, is behind or is supporting X, Y, Z decision. So I would say no, except for minor decision, that's like you just said right now, Professor Gata. We were facing an issue, let's take action, we go ahead and take action. And that happened pretty much on weekly basis. But anything major that requires input from the faculty, I would applaud to Dana because she tried very hard to collect information and data from the faculty. That's my personal opinion, I could be wrong, but that's what I believe.
But when we brought information from the faculty to the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, which were the preferences and desires of 350 members of the faculty, and first we said, would the Faculty Senate please distribute this through the Faculty Senate mechanism so as many faculty as possible had a chance to weigh in? That was not granted. In fact, I don't even remember if that was responded to. Then, when it was presented at the FSCC meeting, it was questioned as being illegitimate because it didn't come from the Senate. So it's excluding the faculty in their voice at a time when, we requested to have emergency Faculty Senate meetings over the summer so we could really hear from the representatives. Those requests were denied. And we also see that, in communications afterwards, it's, 350 faculty are less than 20% of the faculty council. So it's not a big deal. And then when Professor McKernan writes a letter to the administration after the survey that the FSCC administered, doesn't even reference the 350 people who are members of that petition, who took time as faculty to express their concern and trying to advocate for their colleagues and themselves. That is not something they have to say, the FSCC administered this, the Senate administered this, but we have heard formally from 350 of the faculty we represent, whom we serve. And we believe that this is consistent with what we've seen in the survey. Even a small acknowledgement in that way would have gone a long way. And in fact, it was completely dismissed.
But I need to answer this because I don't remember us, like, as a group getting the resolution from 350 faculty. Can you comment on that?
Sorry, I'm drawing a blank on this. I'm sure it's somewhere. Was it over the second resolution? Was it over the organization of having the faculty council meeting? I'm not sure.
It's the teaching modalities, asking administration to allow faculty to choose their teaching modalities as we were allowed to do so last fall.
Essentially return to 2020 COVID protocols.
And I was there, I presented this, Mayor Dix couldn't come that day, I presented this petition that day, and it was completely ignored and ridiculous, quite frankly, and which is appalling. It's signed by Boyd professors and professors all over.
What
happened in July? I can pull up over the summer in July.
It was for what? For emergency faculty work. I believe you asked me to call an emergency faculty.
Microphone.
Yeah.
Use the microphone.
Were you asked to have an emergency faculty senate meeting called?
No, I asked for that several times, all in vain, but I have an email from August 4th here, it's in that handout that was passed around. And I said, next time we have access to the entire membership of faculty council, could you please forward this attachment to all faculty? We need to act today because faculty were really concerned about return to campus. And then there's an email that follows this, the copy of that email. I never received an answer from you. And then I did, in the less than 2 days, we were able to collect 350 signatures on campus with very crippled, connections. And imagine how many more signatures we could have collected. Really everyone was notified. You didn't have to sign it if you didn't believe in it. I mean, nobody's making people do things they don't want to do. So that's what I find, just shutting down fellow faculty member and executive committee member who wants to bring voices of faculty to the table.
Are you talking about the accommodations that we've raised to the level of the provost and all the way to the president stuff?
No, this is this was
for faculty to be able to choose their mode of teaching. We can't.
No, this was a month before you emailed. This is on August 4th. This is before that.
We were doing that all along.
Mandy, have a look at this. And why Mandy's looking at this stuff and we can command any of it? That happened the way, I'm not aware of the situation. I missed the July 4th. stopping the flow. But I agree with you that's a mistake, but let me give you something to correct. You were saying this modality was to go back to the 2020 rule, right? Do you know that the faculty planning executive committee is why we reached the 2020 modality for the code that we have? We had so many meetings with the provost discussing the importance of allowing the faculty to school. And we got her to agree. I'm talking about the previous provost. I'm going to talk about engineering, specifically because I come from engineering, and not just my chair. There are so many chairs in the College of Engineering that force the faculty to teach face-to-face, even though the provost office, and a lot of my colleagues here can agree with that. The provost office is saying they have the right to choose. No one came to me specifically complaining because really they're going to get in trouble if they complain, but I took that to the provost. And I told her multiple times, please talk to the dean, make them talk to the chair. It's not fair what's happening to our faculty. And so many times, she was very proactive. That's what I'm talking about, the working relationship that would actually matter with the faculty. And that was why we got this modality. The interim president, which I have so much respect for, and I'm disappointed that he left, and the provost, they both took a lot of heat from parents and from board of supervisors because they protected the faculty's right to choose modality. Reality is, I think something must have fallen through the cracks in the July meeting because what we're describing right now is not common practice. Hasn't been at least for the past 3 years. That's again, I'm just saying my 2 cents.
Sure, and I appreciate that. And I certainly don't want to suggest that people are not working hard. This is not personal. I believe that the executive committee works very hard. In fact, I would suggest that they perhaps work too hard. You have an entire committee among whom you can distribute some of this labor. The FSCC is charged with assisting the president in the delineated tasks that they have. And in many ways, I know that the members of the committee who have felt some concern about being excluded would like to take on more tasks. And that's not to say that we can't get good outcomes, but it's
No,
really.
hang on there. We have offered that. I have offered that many times at the meeting. Yes, I have, sir. And they have confirmed every appointee, every committee. I have offered them many times. So I want to be clear. It is not unusual for me. Honestly, I saw the board of supervisors thing. I was in the middle of research. I didn't think much about it. I forwarded it to the officers, which is standard. I forwarded them many things and said, what is this about? Quite frankly, I was impressed with the board of supervisors who even said they would listen to us ever. Because quite frankly, I've never known them to actually respond to anything. And I've been giving the reports for the last 2 years. Now, they have suddenly become a lot more responsive, but I really didn't attribute too much importance to it. I didn't actually read it in word by word. I saw that they cleaned up the language. There's a lot of confusion over the word council. We've already gone over that several times. And I don't know what it would actually change. The faculty council is expected and welcome to organize. Absolutely, that hasn't changed. There are many points in the board of supervisors regulations that they said that they have ultimate veto power over anything we decide. So I honestly forwarded it. I do this frequently to the officers, ask for feedback. I did not know it was on the agenda until it popped up. I didn't know it was intended for the on the agenda. I hadn't seen the agenda.
But the email from Matt Lee says that this is for consideration at Friday's Board of Supervisors meeting.
Oh, yeah. Well,
right? I mean, it's expressly there, and your response is that it seems the BOS. So the response to Matt is. Sorry, I have so many emails here. Essentially, you say, please give me feedback. I need to prepare my comments prepare my report for the Board of Supervisors on Friday. So it was clear that you understood as of Wednesday evening that this was for the meeting on Friday. You were soliciting the feedback from the officers of the FSCC to assist you in preparing your report.
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't see that. All I saw was one.
This is,
Actually, Daniel, I'm going off my memory, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the first sentence is that he made that, I'm sorry, Nancy, this just came through my desk, or something to that effect.
That's what it said.
Okay.
Like, he was, like, the provost himself was saying that this is just.
We cannot hear you.
Well, I'm so sorry. I'm saying that the email from the provost, the first couple of lines, that I'm sorry, Nancy, this is like, it sounded like, the language sounded like this came to the provost from the upper administration, from recent coding office, on the spur of the moment, and he's like, I don't have much to do with it, so I'm forwarding it to you.
No, I'm sorry, but that's not correct. The email from Matt Lee.
Can you read it?
Hi, Mandy. Attaches a copy of the regulation changes the board intends to entertain on Friday. I wish I could be there, but I will be out of the country on a trip planned many months ago. And the response is, okay, thanks.
What date was that?
I think
That was on Wednesday, the 8th.
I honestly, well, I must not have read it very closely. I said, okay, thanks, and then I did forward it to them in preparation for my report for the council of faculty advisors, and that's where that's where it is. That's where it was. I didn't intend to bring it up with the faculty council, bring it up with the board of supervisors.
If I may, but that would have been just too late, had it been, Mandy gives her report at the end of the Board of Supervisors meeting, they would have already voted on it. So we're still waiting to meet Dravi. I mean, we haven't had a meeting with him. I think we had decided, or at least vaguely talk about having him come to the Senate meeting and talk to us about these revisions. These revisions were so inconsequential and unimportant. Why weren't they shared by the executive committee membership? And with you, all of you. And if you look in that handout, I don't have it anymore, one of the pages gives you the 2 pages of those revisions. Look at all the redactions in it. Look at how many things are crossed out in it. These are not minor changes. And I'll leave it up to you to decide whatever you want, but you were left in the dark. We should know that this is happening.
Sure, yeah, yes.
I just want to say, like, I'm very glad we signed up a new one, and whenever Mandy sends us a mail, me and my colleague Shane Stadler, we quickly get into action, we read the mails carefully. We, like, for example, what was called the Rapid School Strategy Document, leader survey, and so on. We take the things extremely seriously, and I'm really disappointed to hear from Mandy that when such an important mail came, like, or when that agenda was there, she didn't even look at it carefully when it came from Board of Supervisors. I think this is really very disappointing, and I think that there is huge anger in general faculty membership against the leadership, main leadership here. And I want to ask another question, that I know that as a senator, I can only serve for 3 years, then I have to take a 1-year break, and only then I can come back if I'm elected. I just want to know, like, how many of the senior leadership in the executive committee have been serving for a very long time? Is there any time limit on serving on the leadership? In the executive committee?
There is now.
No, there's not.
By the way, all the
Yep.
FFC meetings are open meetings, so anybody can come and listen and see what's going on.
My question is, like, to serve as a president or the vice president, is there a term limit that you can only serve for 3 years and then you have to take a break and so on? If we have that limit, and if members at large have that limit, why doesn't the senior leadership has that limit?
Well, yes, I think President Koch served for 11 years, 10. It's a very long time. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. So, right, I think, as I understood it, and I have to look now, I thought we put term limits in our latest.
In the last revision we did.
So,
Yeah.
term limits were included in the latest revisions to the Constitution, but those amendments to the Constitution have not been approved by the Faculty Council as is required by the Constitution. And so to this date, they are not enforced. So it has been proposed that the Faculty Council vote to authorize the changes, which would then institute, I believe, a 3-term limit on the president but each term would be extended to 2 years instead of 1. But at the moment, they are not enforced, and so we are still at 1-year terms for an indeterminate possibility for reelection.
To be clear, the bylaws presented online for October 29, 2020 are not enforced bylaws?
The bylaws are, the Constitution is not. Because there's different mechanisms for approval of the revisions. The constitutional changes have to be approved by the Faculty Council. The Senate can change its own bylaws and vote on that. So the bylaws should be up to date. The Constitution that is posted is not, it has not been voted on in accordance with the Faculty Council, as stipulated by the Constitution.
Okay, I think Professor Miles has been raising his hand.
Yes, I'm sorry. This is all very disappointing.
Can you speak louder?
Yes, I will. I was on the Faculty Senate Executive Committee last year, so I rotated off at the beginning of class, the beginning of classes this term. One point of clarification, every single FSCC meeting, before the meeting, we were asked to solicit agenda items. Every time I solicited an agenda item, it was put on the agenda. 100%, I have every email. This is the part that I'm going to try to speak as carefully as possible. You know that about my emails because you have them. I'm an untenured faculty member, and my emails are being circulated in a packet at the Faculty Senate meeting. I find that so disappointing, not just for me, but for us as a community. And I love you. I'm your biggest fan. But I think this is a huge mistake. If we want to have a faculty who trusts one another, who comes together, we have to be able to trust our email. I can no longer feel comfortable in my email between my bosses, between my professors, because it showed up here. That's not fair. Well, that's not fair. And I understand. Excuse me?
This is a question. I mean, I'm out of business. I don't ever know until you're not really. I'll get some politics back. This is a question. Why was your college having unfigured copies?
I was elected. I had tenure at a previous institution, and I came here on a short tenure class.
Okay.
So it's not as if I was involved in faculty senate or It's not like I'm 12 years old.
All right, there's a question in the back. Yes.
Stan Rivera, I'm brand new, this is my first time coming here, I am tenured, so I don't have to speak carefully.
Be careful.
Be careful. No! The point about email being circulated, I absolutely agree with how it feels. I'm disgusted to see that you're just reading emails you don't have half the ones you're reading. Can we have some of yours if we want them?
Sure. Yeah, anyone can file.
I would like all the emails related to putting this resolution together. That's what I want.
Okay. Sure. Contact me afterwards.
No, let's not. Let's not get each other's emails. Let's agree not to go into each other's emails.
So respectfully, there is a difference, right? And the difference is that we are not randomly soliciting or presenting requests for emails from faculty members. This was a targeted search undertaken to understand the genesis of the Board of Supervisors regulations. There were only 3 faculty members included in the original request. Everyone else was members of the administration or the Board of Supervisors. Now, incidentally, other faculty were included in this request on matters that were germane to the quest or the thrust of the question at hand. You will also notice that outside of the 3 individuals who were named in the request, identifying information in anything that has been circulated has been redacted. So, respectfully, John, in your email.
Why was that? Why is it redacted?
Because we did not want to include anyone who was not part of the search and who also did not appear to be included in the decision making.
But there is a chilling effect to that, whether you redact my name or
You're
not.
censoring information.
I mean, I'd be happy to.
Do you understand that there is a chilling effect?
These are public emails. We're not changing the nature of.
Do you understand that there is a chilling effect when you read people's emails?
I would suggest that our orientation to our emails should be that they should always be considered, that they could be public at any time to our employers, to our students, to the families of our students, to the Louisiana legislature, to anyone who would feel that they are eligible to.
None of those people that you just listed is a fellow faculty member. If the administration wants to come and get my emails, so be it. Can't do a thing about it. I respect my colleagues enough to say that I would never ask for someone else's emails.
I appreciate that it is your position. I would respectfully disagree,
Okay.
but we have the opportunity to do that.
Professor Delzell's been waiting a while, I'm trying to keep track, but Delzell, yes, Professor Delzell.
Let me see, first, the point of information, you asked about how many times the officer can serve, and back in 1999, when you guys were not even born yet, right? There was a resolution to change the bylaws, which allowed current members, sitting members of the executive committee to be eligible to be nominated for executive committee positions. In other words, even though their term as a senator might expire, they can still carry on. And I was a new senator in those days. I didn't really know what was going on, but it seems the officers at that time thought that would be useful. Maybe it's helpful to have some continuity. I don't know. You can read this back in 1999 in March. Maybe it should be changed. I don't know. Secondly, I think what we're watching here is a kind of an ambush. It's not really the proper procedure for this type of argument. I mean, we didn't find out until the last half hour what all these details of the allegations are. And I think normally in a court proceeding, you give discovery to your defendant. Before you get to the judge, you exchange documents and you let each other review these things and prepare defense. And here we're getting this all at once here, and people don't even have time to read what is here. I can't read it, it's too much. So I propose we give it a week, a month from now or whatever, and let people digest it, especially let the defendants have a chance to prepare something and make it a little bit more like due process, since that's what this is. This is kind of a proceeding here.
Well, I mean, to be fair, this is not a legal proceeding. We have no defendants. This is a procedural matter of a deliberative body making decisions about its representation. Now, part of the reason that we were parsimonious in the resolution is we know how these things work. I mean, we've all been there. All of a sudden, people start sending email chains along, and we're debating the matter via email, multiple days before this, and we wanted the deliberation to occur as it has within the meeting, with the understanding that customarily there is also a second reading. Right, so part of what you have proposed is the standard operating procedure, which is that there will be a time for deliberation between the first reading and the second reading. So I do not disagree with you that some opportunity here for further investigation and information, consideration is standard operating procedure for the Senate.
But just as you criticize them for not having promulgated lots of information quickly to everybody, we could criticize you for not having promulgated this in advance of the meeting. We're not ready for this meeting. Like I say, I can't evaluate the merits of these accusations without some time.
I'm not asking you to vote right now.
I don't, but I think we've had enough. I move we postpone this or close debate basically and continue next month.
Second.
Anyone opposed? All right, seeing none. Next resolution. All right, first reading resolution 2109, correcting LSU's misquotation of the FDA's vaccine letter. Professor Delzell. Okay, Professor Delzell, sorry, Berryman, Friedland, Raleigh, and Rubin.
Let's see, lose my LSU map. It's good to see some of the old timers that I haven't seen for a few years. Now, let me read my resolution here, or our resolution. 2109, correcting LSU's misquotation of the FDA's vaccine letter. Whereas, on August 24th and 27th of this year, the LSU admin wrote to all LSU students and employees declaring, quote, yesterday the FDA granted full approval to the Pfizer vaccine for anyone 16 and over. And the FDA granted full approval to the Pfizer vaccine. And whereas on August 23rd and 24th and 26th, the Rebel League declared the Food and Drug Administration granted full approval to Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. And buttons here. Yes. Wait a minute, sorry, running these up and down buttons. And the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's full approval of the Pfizer shot, and the Food and Drug Administration approved the Pfizer vaccine. Whereas the above references to the quote, the unquote, Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine give the impression that there is only one Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, when in reality there are two. Number one, quote, Comirnaty, parenthesis, COVID-19 vaccine, comma, mRNA, and number two, quote, Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. Whereas on August 23rd, the FDA wrote two separate letters, one for each of these vaccines. Number five, whereas the letter for Comirnaty approved Comirnaty, whilst the letter for the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine merely reissued the emergency use authorization, or EUA, for that vaccine. Parenthesis, the FDA calls a medical product with an EUA, quote, authorized, unquote, not approved, and declared on pages 13 and 14 of the October 20th version of that letter, because they had many versions. That letter goes back to last December, and I think I get the history of it here, December, and then it came again in February, and May, and June, and August, two or three letters in August, and one in September, and one in October. So each time they update it, but they summarize the previous ones. And anyway, what did they say in all of these last three versions of the letter? Quote, all descriptive printed matter, advertising and promotional material relating to the use of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine clearly and conspicuously shall state that this product has not been approved or licensed by the FDA. Whereas that FDA letter also declared, quote, the licensed vaccine, namely Comirnaty, has the same formulation as the EUA authorized vaccine, namely Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, and the products can be used interchangeably to provide doses for primary vaccination or a booster dose without presenting any safety or effectiveness concern. The products are legally distinct with certain differences that do not impact safety or effectiveness. And on page 7 of that letter, although Comirnaty COVID-19 vaccine mRNA is approved to prevent COVID-19 in individuals 16 years of age and older, there is not sufficient approved vaccine available for distribution to this population in its entirety at the time of reissuance of this EUA. Whereas the Louisiana Department of Public Health correctly declares, quote, the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine has not been approved or licensed by the FDA. Whereas the only vaccine available at the LSU Student Union Theater is the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, not Comirnaty. And right before the injection, the personnel there give the patient Pfizer's 7-page fact sheet dated April 6th on its Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. And that fact sheet's question and answer Q&A list correctly declares on page 1, what is the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine? The Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine is an unapproved vaccine that may prevent COVID-19. There is no FDA-approved vaccine to prevent COVID-19. The LSU Student Union appropriately does not provide the latest version, 9 pages, dated October 20th, of Pfizer's fact sheet, which is mainly about Comirnaty and which refers to the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine as, quote, authorized, but which fails to mention explicitly whether or not that vaccine has been, quote, approved, despite the FDA's requirement quoted above that it do so. Just a side comment, if you know the FDA's terminology, then you realize, you can tell that it must not be approved just because it is authorized. No product can be both authorized and approved at the same time. But the layman might not understand that use of the terminology. Anyway, number 9, whereas the FDA's letters give no rationale for the FDA's, quote, legal distinction between the two Pfizer COVID vaccines, or why the FDA approved the vaccine that it says is not available in the United States, but did not approve the vaccine that is available. Therefore, be it resolved that the LSU Faculty Senate recommends that the LSU administration and the Rebel League correct their various August statements above and declare that as of October 2021, the FDA has not approved the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine or any other COVID vaccine available in the U.S.
All right, Is there a motion to move this to discussion? Yes, and a second, yes, indeed. All right, it's open for discussion.
Hi, Joe. So, you know, we know each other, obviously. I know you're just a smart man.
Can you speak in the mic?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm very sorry. Okay, can you, is that better? Sorry about that. I'm new here. I think that the resolution is based on a misunderstanding. So I'm looking currently at the FDA site, and I'm looking at the webpage on the Conformity and Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, and the opening paragraph is, on August 23rd, 2021, the FDA approved the first COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine has been known as Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine and will now be marketed as Conformity for the prevention of COVID-19 disease in individuals 16 years of age and older. So what we have here is one vaccine with two names. Now, the confusion about the authorization and, the confusion about the authorization and the approval comes in that at the time it was approved, there was not enough of the Conformity available to do everybody, right? And so the extended use authorization, the emergency use authorization was extended to cover people 12 through 15. So it is currently, the one vaccine with two names is currently under emergency use authorization for people 12 to 15, and it is approved and being marketed under the name Conformity for 16 and over. So, you know, just as you, right, can be known as Professor Delzell, there's one name, and also as Charles Delzell, there's another name, but you're still the same person. That's exactly what we have going on here. It's just there's all this other legal stuff going on because of stocks of the vaccine and needing to cover, you know, this group, this age group versus that age group.
Well, yes, I'm aware of that. I think what you were reading there was a press release from the FDA dated August 23rd. What did it say at the very top of that document? I can't see.
So it's not, this is the FDA webpage, it's the informational webpage. The content is current as of 10/26, 2021, so a couple days ago. I just read you the first paragraph. It goes on after that. The first paragraph, I'll read it again. On August 23rd.
I remember what it said.
Okay, good.
But I'm just trying to remember what is the headline at the very top of this thing. I thought it might have said press release or.
Nope.
There was something like that on August 23rd.
No press release. This is the official FDA website, and the heading of the page is Conformity and Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine.
All right. Well, I've read that sentence before, and you're right. However, here I am displaying for the projector the letter that I'm talking about, which is also quite recent, October 20th. It's the third version of, since August 23rd, it's really more like the 7th or 8th version since December. But here, if we go to page 13, which is where I said to go, I hope it's still there. A few days since I put that. Page 10. Page 14, I missed it.
And exactly what is this letter?
Or maybe it's starting on page 14. This document is the letter that the FDA wrote to Pfizer about the, about their, well, they wrote two letters on August 23rd and then since then, but this is about the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. And here it is, I think I see it, yeah. Read this thing here. All descriptive printed matter, advertising and promotional material, this is what I quoted in the resolution, shall clearly and conspicuously shall say that this product has not been approved or licensed by the FDA, but only has emergency use authorization. So there is a question, when it's true, here they're saying, right on the earlier page, which I also quoted, they're said to be legally distinct. And yet, in that statement that you were reading, they blurred the two and made them appear to be not legally distinct. So you've got a conflict here, maybe with the FDA. I don't pretend to know what these words mean completely, like legally distinct. I didn't write it. And I don't know, as I say, why they would approve one but not the other, but they've especially disapproved, or at least not approved, this vaccine 3 times since August 23rd. They did it August 23rd, I think it was September 22nd, and now October 20th. So, it's something, it's a puzzle, yes. Whoever's next.
I have many questions. One is why do we care? It did exactly the same vaccine, same formulation, different names. Why are we debating this? Why are we talking about this? It seems like such a waste of time. I heard about this the first time that I driving through Oklahoma by a conservative radio host named Bubba, and it was a talking point. And they're trying to shoot down the validity of the vaccine. And I don't know what the strategy here is, but with the same thing, if you go to the Walgreens website right now, you can sign up for a shot of, and I wrote it down, the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Comma, in brackets, Comirnaty vaccine. It's available at Walgreens. So this is a waste of time, I'm sorry.
Okay, any additional comments? I saw another hand. Dr. Vaughn,
Yeah, and just if you seem to say, and this is really splitting hairs, but you seem to say that no vaccine, COVID vaccine, has been approved and available in the US. But earlier on you said that the community one has been approved.
But it's not available.
Yeah, you just said it is.
Well, I'm reading the FDA's letter. Now, they might be wrong, of course, but let's reread it again. It's here, I think I'm displaying it. Where is it? Yes, here. There is not sufficient approved vaccine available for this.
In its entirety.
Right, so
In its entirety.
that's true, that's true. So maybe there's anywhere from one vaccine available to, I don't know, some number, we don't know. But apparently it's not available at LSU. I've gone to the student union, I went there a couple of weeks ago, and they said the only vaccine they've got is the BioNTech one.
Yes?
Jay Gustafson, it's pretty obvious, we don't know what the FDA is saying, so we can't possibly ask the president to correct their statements if we can't understand what the FDA is saying. So I agree that we're wasting our time here.
No, I think, sorry, I'm interrupting, someone will be forward.
Somebody back there.
Additional questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The point of it is the truth.
Point of order.
Are you a senator, ma'am?
No.
Okay, and we can't allow you to speak right now.
Now, I will say that, you asked, what's the point? And it's true, we're not lawyers, most of us at least, and I'm not asking us to be lawyers or practice law without a license, but we are scholars. And whatever our discipline is, we have to read texts all the time, and we quote texts sometimes, and there is a standard of quoting or behavior that you should quote a text faithfully, without distortion. And I'm saying that the administration and media has not been faithfully quoting the letters of the FDA. Here the FDA says not approved, and then practically the entire world is saying approved. And as scholars, we know the difference between not approved and approved. You don't have to be a lawyer.
I don't think the FDA is saying it's not approved. They say it is authorized. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is authorized for the age group 12 to 16, and the community vaccine is now approved for people 16 and older. It's one and the same thing, but they cannot say that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is approved because it's still under emergency use authorization.
Well, they could have just changed it. They could have said, now we end the emergency use authorization, and now we approve it.
They can't because they're two separate age groups, and the one is still under review.
No, they're both, at least they
So
include
the one is
the
authorized, and
age.
the other one is approved, the other age, it's approved for the other age group. I mean, for me, it's very clear, but it's just.
Yes. Yeah,
Professor Glenn and a colleague of Dr. Delzell,
with whom I discussed this letter over the past few days. My feeling is that the documentation from the FDA has some ambiguities that I don't understand. I don't know how deep or how far they go. But until these ambiguities are fully understood, I don't see how we could possibly make a recommendation to other bodies to correct something. I understand, Chip, Dr. Della, I understand the point, and I think it is valid and not unreasonable to seek clarity on an issue like this. I think that's a positive thing to do, particularly when there are contentious discussions, in the public sphere, and Bob is doing. So it would be great for for people, for the university, for people communicating about this, to be very clear. And perhaps, the best thing at some point that some people could do is to say there is an ambiguity. But fortunately, we have a month during which we can seek clarity on whatever remains ambiguous.
Okay, well, the hour is very late. We're getting charged an extra $1,000, I believe. Yeah. So,
Quick question. Why are we focusing on Pfizer? They're not been approved as well. Why are we focusing on one vaccine, which is Pfizer? There are other vaccines that have been fully approved, like Moderna, have been fully approved. It's not emergency authorization. And it's illegal with FDA, like Vaccination, Green, and others. So why are we focusing on Pfizer?
Well, I'm not aware that Moderna has been approved, it's just been authorized, it's never authorized, it's opposite of approved.
No, fully approved vaccine. I know.
Actually,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, I'll look at that.
okay.
I'm not aware of that.
Well, are there, yes, okay, yeah.
I move that we table this for the moment and go home and feed our kids and enjoy the rest of the evening and discuss it again in a week.
So you're moving to adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
It's seconded, it's not debatable and not amendable, so the meeting is now adjourned.
No, it didn't.
You have to vote. Okay, anyone opposed to dismissing the meeting?
One member cannot adjourn the meeting. Please.
All right, that's it. All right, is there any opposition? Well, I mean, it's just not, we can't discuss it. Is there any opposition to adjourning the meeting? All right, I did. Yeah.